Chapter 75 Fighting Against Ingho. Although Long Chen had long since been on guard against him, he had still never thought that Ingho's speed was so terrifying. As soon as he just barely moved, he had already arrived in front of him. But he had already prepared himself for this. If Ingho wasn't strong, how could he be listed with his father as one of the Empire's top 3 experts? Long Chen's heart was completely calm as he watched the sword slash towards his neck. Any fear was put away. He entered a kind of special state. Not paying the slightest attention to Ingho's sword, his power exploded as he slashed the broadsword in his hands at Ingho's waist. The broadsword was exceptionally heavy, but now that he had 12 cyclones, his physical strength had reached an inconceivable level. It was no longer any problem to Long Chen. Wind whistled. The current Long Chen no longer dared to hold anything back. As he slashed with that broadsword with his full strength, even space seemed to be cut apart. Ingho clearly had not expected that Long Chen would be so unafraid of death. This was clearly an attack that would cause both sides to suffer. But despite it being such a basic method, it caused his attack to completely collapse. The sword in his hand was only 3 feet long, a standard sword length. But Long Chen's broadsword was 7 feet long. If their attacks continued like this, then the result would be that while his sword would manage to slash through Long Chen's throat, Long Chen's broadsword would also cut apart his body. No matter how conceited he was, he would never dare use his body to block Long Chen's broadsword. Even a muscle rebirth expert like him was unable to do that. He had no choice but to give up his attack. Turning his body, he floated back, dodging the sword by just a fraction of an inch. Although Long Chen seemed as if he was planning on bringing Ingho down even at the cost of his own life, the truth was that he was sure that if he had dodged instead, Ingho, who had taken the initiative, would continue to press his advantage. If he let Ingho attack him consecutively, he would just be quickening his defeat. Seeing Ingho retreat, Long Chen roared, his voice like spring thunder. His broadsword slash suddenly stopped and became a stab straight for Ingho's stomach. Ingho had only just dodged when he saw Long Chen suddenly change attacks. His expression couldn't help changing slightly. After all, that broadsword was heavy to an astonishing level. Ingho had already seen that, so he didn't dare take it head-on. But the important thing was that such a shockingly heavy broadsword was able to be controlled so easily by Long Chen. He was even able of switching attack patterns in the middle of an attack. That meant Long Chen's strength had already reached a terrifying level. It's just brute force? Ingho coldly snorted. His sword streaked through the air and heavily stabbed against Long Chen's broadsword. Sparks shot everywhere. Long Chen was shocked that his full-strength attack was pushed to the side by Ingho's sword, causing his sword to only hit air as it went past Ingho's body. More importantly, he had used so much force that with the addition of Ingho's sword stab, Long Chen's body was also forced forward along with his broadsword. Long Chen had only just realized what a terrible situation he was in when Ingho's sword shot out as fast as thunder, aiming right for a vital point on his stomach. Relying on his spirit's battle experience, he instinctively twisted. Ingho's speed was too quick for him to dodge. His sword stabbed a bloody hole in his stomach. Luckily, Long Chen's twisting had caused him to miss a vital point. But before Long Chen could even take a breath, Ingho's second slash was already coming, this time for his throat. Long Chen's heart was wildly thumping. This was what a muscle rebirth expert was? There was no way to fight on par with him. In front of Ingho, Long Chen was like a child without the slightest ability to retaliate. The speed of Ingho's sword was inconceivable. It was already too late for him to dodge. He could only watch with his eyes wide opened as it approached his throat. Other than the icy cold sword that was approaching, the only other thing in his eyes was Ingho, whose expression was filled with ridicule and resentment. This was the first time Long Chen felt death be so close. Fuck off. A golden light flew by. Due to the wind revolving around it, a sharp whistling sound rang out as it cut the air apart. Just as Ingho's sword had been about to pierce Long Chen's throat, a huge golden axe viciously chopped down at Ingho. Amon's reactions had been a bit slow. Seeing the two of them talking and then suddenly start fighting, he hadn't even reacted until he saw that Long Chen's life was about to be lost. In a great hurry, he had charged forward, swinging down his axe with his full strength. Ho was just about to kill Long Chen. Suddenly feeling his back turn cold and an intense mortal danger, although he was a bit unwilling, he had no choice but to give up his killing attack on Long Chen and swing his sword up to meet Amon's battle axe. Amon was forced back dozens of meters and looked in shock at Ho. Ho also didn't have an easy time as he was shaken back several meters. His sword blow just now had used a technique to shift the power away. However, he was still forced back. Even his arm was somewhat numb. He was actually greatly shaken by this. Amon was practically a magical beast in human form. Having his life saved, Long Chen quickly whispered a few things to Amon, ending with, "Amon, he's very difficult to deal with. We'll have to stake our lives." "Stake your lives?" Ho rubbed his somewhat numb arm and sneered, "With just your superficial tricks and that brute force? You too might be very powerful compared to others, but in front of a muscle rebirth expert like me, neither of you have the slightest chance." Long Chen pointed his sword at Ho. "Whether or not we have a chance is something we'll only know after trying." Ho didn't seem to be in a rush to kill them. He stabbed his sword into the ground like a crutch. He began to indifferently speak. "Although I can't see through your cultivation bases, there's not the slightest trace of blood qi coming from your bodies. That means you are both in qi condensation. As a present I'll be sending to your father, I'll do you a favor and tell you just how great the difference is between us. At qi condensation you absorb heaven and earth's spiritual qi into your own body, allowing you to use heaven and earth's power for your own. What you cultivate is qi. At blood condensation you use heaven and earth's spiritual qi to purify your blood. It allows you to strengthen your body. What you cultivate is physical power. Qi and physical strength add together to release a great strength. However, it is only additive. Once you reach muscle rebirth, your muscles' physical strength explodes and qi nourishes your spirit. Your qi and physical body merge together perfectly. But at muscle rebirth, the might produced by qi and body is no longer additive, but multiplicative. If blood condensation's combat level is 10 plus 10, then muscle rebirth's combat level is 10 times time. Long Chen's core was shaken greatly. He knew Ho wasn't telling them this to be nice. He was telling them just how great the difference between them was in order to make them give up and despair. Although he knew that, Long Chen's heart was still horrified. If what he said was really true, then they really wouldn't stand a chance. And even ignoring his power, just Ho's strange movements and his speed, which was fast as lightning, were enough to shock him. This was an absolutely hopeless situation. No wonder the fourth prince dared to make this scheme. Long Chen was to kill Xia Changfeng, and then Ho would then kill him. Everything would return to normal after that. It was truly a deep scheme. Amon obviously wasn't thinking as much as Long Chen. He only glared straight at Ho. "Brother Long, what is he saying? Additive and multiplicative? What's qi condensation and blood condensation? Don't bother with what he says. Remember what I told you just now," quietly replied Long Chen. Ho indifferently looked at Long Chen. "What? You really still want to struggle at this point? Do you doubt what I just said?" Long Chen raised his sword at him and sneered, "You're wearing a photographic jade on your chest. You want to take a picture of my despair before death for my father, right?" He had been too nervous before, but now he noticed there was a strange jade on his chest. That jade had many curving lines on it. Although Long Chen had never studied inscription arts, he had heard of photographic jades. The inscriptions on them could record images for a short time. Long Chen had obviously correctly guessed Ho's intentions. I really never expected to be seen through Bu. How boring." Ho lightly stroked the jade. "I really did want to send the full image as the gift. First I'll send your head to him. Then I'll show him the image of your deathbed struggle. Only then can I relieve the hatred I've repressed for so many years." Long Chen laughed. "What a shady move. You really are a contemptible little man. A half-man, half-woman sissy. You only use these disdainful moves. My father could sever your finger, Today I'll sever your head." He suddenly stamped his foot. Even the land trembled with him as he shot forward like a wild gale, slashing his sword at Ingho. Ignorant kid, today I'll let you see just how terrifying it is when chi merges with your body." Ingho coldly snorted and his robes began to float without any wind. Green veins began to bulge on his skin like many swimming snakes. That was a specific attribute of the muscle rebirth realm. When his entire body was covered in green veins, his aura suddenly exploded and a terrifying energy shot out everywhere. The space around was even twisted and warped. Seeing this, Long Chen ground his teeth. No matter how powerful Ingho was, he had to do his utmost to fight. Otherwise he definitely wouldn't have a good burial. He was afraid of death. If he really did die, what would happen to his mother? What would happen to Chu Yao? What about his arrangement with Meng Qi? He couldn't die. But only by going all out and risking his life would there even be the slightest chance of him surviving. His entire energy gathered into the broadsword. Long Chen placed aside his fear and bravely charged into the face of death. Even without his urging, his Feng Fu star slowly began to circulate on its own. After it had only half circulated, it seemed as if some sort of energy was lacking and it slowly returned to calm. Die! He courageously charged forward. His sword shook the sky as he used his full force to bring it slashing down. Chapter 76: The Terrifying Ingho. Ingho coldly smiled both mockingly and disdainfully. His hand, which was now covered with bulging veins, brandished his sword, causing it to slice through space. Boom! Terrifying waves of qi surged out violently, causing the entire mountain valley to tremble. Long Chen suddenly felt as if he had been smashed by a huge mountain. He was sent tumbling through the air, vomiting out blood. He rolled dozens of meters and spit out another mouthful of blood. His insides felt as if they were on fire. Long Chen's face was covered with shock and terror. Ingho's words from before had not just been to frighten him. They had been the truth. When qi and physical power superimposed, the strength that could be unleashed was truly enough to cause a person to despair. Bastard! Amon let out an angry roar. His axe smashed down right after Long Chen was sent flying. But Ingho's sword was as quick as lightning, quickly striking against Amon's battle axe. Amon was sent flying back like a skipping stone, tumbling through the air several times before heavily landing on the ground. But while Amon was sent back flying further than Long Chen, he didn't spit out any blood. This truly surprised Ingho. Now you too should be convinced. In front of true strength, all your struggles are futile. Give up. Ingho didn't chase after them to attack. He stood in his original position like an emperor, coldly looking down on them. Relying on the broadsword to struggle back up, Long Chen shook his head, blood staining his mouth. Giving up midway isn't my style. I still haven't chopped off your head yet either. Ingho coldly looked back at Long Chen. His anger suddenly turned into laughter. Ha, you truly are worthy of being Long Tianxiao's son. You really are tough as bones. I hope once I crush every single bone in your body you can still stay as tough. Kid, go repent in the underworld. After speaking, his body suddenly moved. Long Chen was shocked to realize that he was looking at an afterimage. Ingho's speed was inconceivable and he arrived in front of Long Chen in an instant, slashing with his sword. Seeing Ingho's attack, Long Chen once again didn't bother with defending, instead also sending a slash out at Ingho. This method of giving up defense to take one's enemy down as well wasn't really a method. It was a technique that could only be used when all else was useless. In terms of speed, Long Chen was unable to compare to Ingho. And in terms of power, he was also not his match. All he could rely on was the length of his broadsword. He could only use his courage and boldness to fight against him. Although such a technique was extremely dangerous, it would at least allow him to delay for a bit. As expected, Ingho was fundamentally incapable of accepting such an exchange where he would also be heavily injured. He recalled his sword to defend, looking for another opportunity to attack. At this time, Amon also charged over, hacking down with his axe. It seemed that the previous blow hadn't harmed him at all. His physical body truly was so formidable that it was frightening. Long Chen was gratified to see that Amon seemed to suddenly become smart. He had learned from Long Chen to ignore Ing Ho's sword and attack with his life on the line. Consecutive blows echoed throughout the valley. The very land trembled with each exchange. With Long Chen and Amon working together and gambling their lives, Ing Ho was actually unable to display his abilities and was forcibly blocked by the two of them. In terms of both power and speed, he had a definite superiority over them. But Long Chen and Amon's attacks were absolutely insane. They didn't care about any blows striking them, only using their bodies to receive his attacks. However, they risked their life to strike fatal blows on him. Ing Ho's face turned green from anger. There were several times when he felt an urge to continue his attack while disregarding their blows in order to kill them, but he still continued to patiently endure. For one thing, Long Chen and Amon's strength was too great. They definitely possessed a fatal danger to him if he were to take their attacks head-on. A slight miscalculation or accident and it wouldn't be just exchanging blows, but exchanging lives. And secondly, he possessed the absolute advantage. Handling Long Chen and Amon was just a matter of time. There was no need for him to take any reckless risks. It was precisely because Long Chen had seen through Ing Ho's thinking that he dared to do as he did. After all, this was an absolute last resort. Without risking his life, he would instead just die immediately. Weapons clashed and flew. An hour passed in just the blink of an eye. Long Chen was alarmed to realize that his physical strength was starting to fade. The broadsword in his hands began to feel heavier and heavier. And as for Amon's side, he wasn't much better off. His axe was no longer as quick and violent as before. He had obviously also reached his limit. Seeing a cold smile appear on Ing Ho's face, Long Chen's heart turned cold. Ing Ho was doing this to capture them alive. He would continue to completely exhaust them so that he could torture them as much as he liked after. Long Chen narrowed his eyes. If you want my life, then we'll have to see if you have the qualifications or not. Ing Ho smiled inside when he saw that Long Chen and Amon's power was weakening and their attacks were becoming slower. Suddenly Long Chen swung his sword too hard. Due to a lack of energy, he stumbled forward a step along with the sword. That one step immediately revealed a huge opening. Almost by reflex, Ing Ho didn't even think. Dodging Amon's axe, his sword directly slashed towards Long Chen's waist. Obviously Long Chen's guess was right. Ing Ho was planning on keeping them barely alive. Otherwise that sword would be going straight for his heart. A cold glimmer shined in Long Chen's eyes. Suddenly his Feng Fu star was activated to its full power. All his power flowed straight into his dantian. The 12 cyclones that were already 300 meters wide immediately grew to 10 times the size. They quickly revolved, and the spiritual qi within 50 kilometers was immediately sucked dry. Whether or not I can succeed, I have to try. Long Chen prayed inside. His 12 cyclones all revolved, causing all that spiritual qi to condense into a cord that flowed through the Liyao point, rushed into the Huiming point, and finally passed through the Chuqi point to enter the Laogong point. When his spiritual qi flowed into the first point, that acupuncture point seemed just like a floodgate that was forced open. After his spiritual qi went through that gate, it somehow began to flow faster, rushing into the next point with an even greater force. Once the spiritual qi had finished through all the layers of superposition and entered the final Laogong point in his hand, Long Chen suddenly felt intense pain coming from his Laogong point. Crap, my meridians can't handle this. As soon as he felt that pain around his Laogong point, he realized the surrounding meridians had begun to be unable to handle the rushing of the spiritual qi and were slowly starting to blow up. Hold for me! Long Chen angrily roared. He could no longer care too much about that. He controlled it so only a strand of that energy flowed out of the Laogong point. Without even thinking about, he injected that strand of energy into his broadsword. The broadsword immediately began to shake and rumble. Just as Ing Ho's sword was about to pierce into Long Chen's waist, he suddenly felt his heart jump and all his hair stand on end. Relying on his many years of battle experience, he instinctively gave up on his attack and hastily retreated. But even as he began to retreat, the broadsword in Long Chen's hand was already raised. The 7-foot-long broadsword emitted a strange light and seemed to possess an aura of endless death as it descended upon Ing-ho. Split the heavens. Ing-ho was completely terrified as he looked up at that sword. That sword had somehow managed to lock him in place. A small chi condensation beginner was actually able to use his chi to lock a muscle rebirth expert 2 realms above him in place. That was absolutely horrifying. Normally such a lock could only occur when the stronger expert attacked the weaker one. If 2 opponents were on the same level, it was extremely difficult for one to lock the other in place. For an insignificant chi condensation cultivator to lock down a muscle rebirth expert was a joke. However, such a thing actually now happened to Ing-ho. But Ing-ho quickly recovered from his shock, sensing the scent of death drawing near. The sword in Long Chen's hand held a strange shine. It was just like a divinity's blade. It mercilessly slashed down. Wave-breaking slash. Now was not the time to be shocked by Long Chen's lock. Seeing that sword slash down, Ing-ho shouted. All the green veins on his body sharply grew until it was like vines were wriggling right under his skin. His aura once more grew to a new level as he also slashed out. Chi waves shout out dozens of meters. This wave-breaking slash was one of Ing-ho's ultimate techniques. It was an Earth-class battle skill. Boom! The moment Long Chen's broadsword met Ing-ho's sword, for a moment, heaven and earth both turned still. Only then did an enormous explosion ring out. 3 figures were sent flying at the same time. The terrifying energy completely destroyed their original battlefield. A huge crater almost 30 meters wide appeared where they had collided. Long Chen felt as if his entire body's bones were about to fall apart from exhaustion. His right hand was hurting particularly. According to common sense, with his current meridian widths, he was still unable to display split the heavens. He had forcibly used it just now. This had completely broken down his meridians surrounding the Laogong point. But he had also finally learned just how terrifying split the heavens was. He had actually been lucky in that at that final moment, he had only used a strand of split the heavens energy. He hadn't dared to use the rest of that energy. But even so, all his hand's meridians were broken. If he had used the full force of that battle skills, perhaps all his meridians would have completely been blown apart and he would truly become a cripple. Other than a lingering fear, Long Chen also felt a burst of excitement. It was already so powerful. Just what class of battle skill had split the heavens reached? You really are worthy of being Long Tianxiao's son. Good, very good, huh? A burst of laughter rang out. The dust slowly scattered and Ing-ho appeared from within. But the current Ing-ho appeared extremely miserable. His clean and tidy clothes had become unbearably tattered. There was a large wound in the middle of his stomach from which blood slowly flowed out. Of the sword in his hand, only the hilt remained now. That exchange just now had completely destroyed his precious sword. Long Chen's pupils shrunk. Although Ing-ho was extremely destitute now, his aura hadn't dropped much at all. That meant Ing-ho still possessed an extremely great fighting capability. Using one hand, he tore off his tattered clothes, revealing his wound and also a soft armor. That armor was a golden color. It appeared extremely flexible and strong. However, even so, a large hole had been split open due to Long Chen's sword. What a powerful battle skill. If I hadn't had this golden silk armor, I really would have died. Looking down at his wound, Ing-ho icily said, I'll give you a chance. If you hand over that battle skill, I'll give you too a quick death. Long Chen switched the broadsword into his left hand. His right hand was already half crippled and was unable to hold it anymore. He forced himself up and coldly laughed, and what if I say no? Long Chen, you better think this through. Death isn't scary. Living a life worse than death is the most painful. And I just happen to have some skill in that area. I'd advise you not to regret anything, icily said Ing-ho. I, Long Chen, have never done anything I've regretted. Long Chen glanced at him and then stealthily cast a meaningful glance at Amun. Long Chen didn't dare be too obvious. After glancing at Amun, Long Chen slowly raised his sword and sneered, Ing Zhao, that move just now was just a testing blow. Now that I've tested it, I'll take you dogshit life. After saying that, he stabbed the sword into the ground. At the same time, waves of chi exploded out and raised up all the dust into the air. Just let me see how capable you are. In-ho grimly laughed. Rubbing his ring, another sword appeared in his hand and he raised it in front of him. But when the dust settled, the guarded In-ho realized that Long Chen had already disappeared, only leaving behind the foolish Amon standing there. In-ho's expression changed. He hastily looked up to see that Long Chen had already fled several hundred meters into the mountains. Borntobe's thoughts. I'm going to try something new that will hopefully allow my footnotes and fonts to pass through. When I copy and paste from my Google Drive, all the fonts and footnotes automatically disappear, but now I'm downloading my Google Docs and then copying and pasting from Word. That seems to transfer over footnotes and fonts. If there are any issues you see popping up, please tell me. I also am going to go for 4 chapters a day. Hopefully that works out. It's cutting it a bit tight for me. I actually wanted to start releasing more a couple weeks back, but then I became deathly sick for a week teach. Chapter 77 Pursuit Deep in the Forest. In-ho's expression changed and he hastily looked up, only to see that Long Chen had already fled hundreds of meters deeper into the mountains. Fuck. For the reserved and elegant In-ho, that was the first he had shouted out such a vulgar word. His eyes were spitting flames. He had been fooled. So the truth was that Long Chen had noticed that his full-strength attack was actually not enough to incapacitate him and that he was simply not a match for a muscle rebirth expert. After saying a couple ruthless words, he had stabbed his sword into the ground to fill the air with dust and then immediately fled. Perhaps fleeing was actually the most valuable combat skill to have. However, when Long Chen noticed that Amon hadn't fled with him and was instead just foolishly standing in his original spot, he was angered to the point of almost spitting out more blood. He had purposely given him a glance just now to tell him there would be a chance to flee. He hadn't expected him to not react and just stand there. But since he had already fled now, he absolutely could not return. In-ho's target was him. As long as he fled, Amon should be safe. As he expected, he had only gone a couple hundred meters before In-ho angrily roared and started charging after him. Stop! Suddenly Amon angrily roared and a red light started to come from his skin. A violent energy soared from his body. He was just like a wild ancient beast that had been awakened. Just as In-ho was about to chase after Long Chen, a huge battle axe whistled over at him, causing his heart to tremble. What most surprised him was that Amon's attack had all of a sudden become much stronger than before. Even before the axe landed, just the wind from it alone was enough to make it hard for him to breathe. The power behind his attacks had at least doubled. Boom! In-ho didn't take it head-on. The new sword in his hand wasn't an equal to his old sword, so he didn't dare meet those blows. The result was that Amon's axe ruthlessly smashed into the ground. His terrifying energy caused the whole valley to shake. Broken rocks shot out everywhere and a shockingly huge crater appeared. Brother Long, quickly run. I'll block him. Seeing his attack miss, he once more sent his axe smashing at In-ho. The fleeing Long Chen was both shocked, angered, and moved. He was shocked that Amon would be able to explode with such terrifying strength. He was furious because there was no point in blocking him. Long Chen wanted In-ho to chase after him. He was also moved that Amon would actually use his own life to try to protect him. Although Amon was a bit foolish, maybe even flat-out stupid, but he had a complete and total trust in Long Chen. He was even willing to give up his own life for him. Long Chen had an urge to both cry and curse. He was extremely worried, but he also didn't dare to stop running. That would simply be telling In-ho that he wouldn't abandon Amon, thus revealing his weak spot. Then both of them would die. Originally he was planning on drawing away In-ho and having Amon flee a different direction. But the result was that Amon didn't seem to understand the slightest of Long Chen's intentions. Boom! In-ho dodged Amon 3 more times. At this time, Amon's strength was growing stupendously. That last attack had been so powerful that he hadn't been able to dodge. Blocking with his sword, he was forced back 5 steps. Die! In-ho raged. Today he had been repeatedly thwarted from killing Long Chen. A grand muscle rebirth expert like him was actually this helpless in front of two insignificant chi condensation beginners. More importantly, Long Chen's final attack just now had caused an internal injury that was not minor. Although he made himself appear fine, the truth was that he had merely suppressed the injury. That was why he didn't want to use any of his power to get past Amon, who was blocking him. He might end up making his internal injury worse. But he was becoming increasingly anxious as he saw Long Chen flee further and further. If he couldn't throw off this giant fellow, then Long Chen really would escape. That was something completely unacceptable. His entire body's green veins bulged again as he also sent a slash out at Amon's attack. Amon suddenly felt an unstoppable force push him back. He only managed to stabilize himself after almost 10 meters. Although Ho didn't specialize in power, the sharp increase in strength after entering the muscle rebirth realm was simply too great. He managed to force Amon back, but Ho also wasn't well off. His stomach was aching dully. That was the result of provoking his internal injury. Long Chen's last attack had now only shaken his internal organs, but even his dantian had been somewhat jolted. That led to his spiritual chi being much more sluggish. In the process of forcing Amon back, he had almost been unable to continue suppressing his injury. Immediately after forcing Amon back, he immediately went to go chase after Long Chen. Long Chen was his main target. "You're not going anywhere." Ho almost went mad with rage. Amon actually hadn't even received an injury despite being blown back and was now charging at him again. Amon truly was a magical beast in human form. His physical body had reached an absolutely frightening level. Just by relying on his physical strength, he had actually managed to forcefully take a muscle rebirth expert's attack. Being unable to throw off Amon, Ho's eyes turned icy cold and he once more used his sword to block Amon's battleaxe. He then snaked his sword through an opening to stab at Amon's stomach. Ho had obviously been infuriated and was willing to kill to get away from this hindrance. But when his sword struck Amon's skin, it was as if he had struck a hard surface. His sword slipped and his full-strength blow immediately lost over half its power. The sword still managed to pierce through Amon's skin. However, it only managed to get 2 inches in before being unable to go any further. It was unable to pierce through Amon's bones. Ho was greatly shocked, as that was the first time such a thing had happened. Even a magical beast's body would be easily pierced through with his cultivation base. But he was apparently unable to do the same to Amon. Amon didn't even seem to notice the wound, viciously smashing down his battleaxe on Ho. He had attacked Amon twice now without being able to give Amon a true injury. Seeing Amon attacking him with that huge battleaxe, he could only first retreat. At this time, he glanced into the distance and couldn't help being worried. Long Chen had already fled over 5 miles. He was just about to enter a thick forest. If he really did enter that forest, then by relying on the coverage, he would have an unacceptably high chance of getting away. But Amon continued to firmly block his way. Grinding his teeth, he raised his sword with both hands and a scarlet flame color appear over it. Cliff-breaking slash. Amon's battleaxe went flying away while he himself was sent tumbling back dozens of meters. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and at the same time, the strange red light from his body faded. His aura sharply fell. Ho had actually been so pressed for time that he had used an Earth-class battle skill. He had managed to send Amon flying, but Amon only spit out a single mouthful of blood. But on the other hand, that one attack caused his internal injury to almost flare out of control. He hastily took out a healing pill from his ring. That was a precious high-grade healing pill that he had collected many years ago. For his cultivation base, middle-grade or lower medicinal pills were basically without any effect, while high-grade medicinal pills were extremely rare. So swallowing that medicinal pill truly caused him a heartache. Ho glanced at Amon, who was lying on the ground, and hesitated for a moment. He really wanted to kill Amon, as he was practically a monster. He would definitely be terrifying once he matured. But then looking at Long Chen, who was on the eve of hiding in the forest, Ho ground his teeth. Weighing his options, he still decided to ignore Amon and chase directly after Long Chen. Amon was extremely worried when he saw In Ho go straight after Long Chen. He crawled back up to give chase as well. But he only managed to take 2 steps before he felt the world spinning around him. Amon fell on his butt. His face was completely pale and he couldn't stop his hands from shivering. That was a sign that he had overdrafted his strength. Viciously punching the ground, he could only watch as In Ho's figure faded deep into the valley. Long Chen had kept a watch over their battle as he had fled. Seeing Amon unwaveringly block In Ho truly caused him to panic. If Amon really did enrage In Ho, then he really might not take Long Chen into consideration and just kill Amon. If that happened, then Long Chen would regret it for a lifetime. But according to his understanding of In Ho, he wasn't the type of person to lose his cool because of anger. When he was just about to enter the forest, he saw In Ho ignore Amon to chase after him, causing him to finally feel some relief. He then focused his full strength on running. Entering the forest, everything suddenly turned quiet. Countless huge trees reached for the sky, making it so that it was extremely difficult for any sunlight to get through. Long Chen quickly adapted to the lighting and charged forward, doing his best not to step on any vegetation. Doing so would leave behind obvious tracks. Long Chen instead did his best to land on rocks or perhaps overturn trees. That way In Ho would not find his trail and would require a great deal of time to search for him. Then his advantage would become much more obvious. The most important part of this chase would be this beginning part. He was rushing forward as quickly as possible. Once In Ho entered the forest though, he would have to become completely silent and not move at all at the beginning. Otherwise In Ho would manage to find his position through sound. Long Chen's only advantage over him was that he was a pill cultivator. His spirit was exceptionally strong. He would be able to sense his opponent from a large distance. From such a distance, he wouldn't be able to get a perfect view on him, but he would still be able to sense In Ho's relative position. Once Long Chen had fled over 5 miles, he suddenly stopped and even suppressed his own breathing, not moving at all. That was because he had sensed that In Ho had just entered the forest. Long Chen also closed his eyes and let himself enter an empty spirit state, making it so that he seemed like just another rock in the forest, completely isolating his aura. Having entered this state, he could see In Ho who had just entered the forest. As he had expected, he immediately paused and listened closely for Long Chen. In Ho waited for over the time it took for an incense stick to burn, but was unable to hear any breathing. Having just entered the forest, everything was completely silent to a frightening degree. But after 15 minutes had passed, birds and insects began to play their own music, causing the forest to immediately become bustling with noise. Those bird calls caused In Ho's expression to become increasingly ugly. He hadn't expected Long Chen to be so crafty. He actually knew to use such a method to hide his trail. Long Chen smiled. It seemed his chances of fleeing successfully had increased again. Although the two of them were only separated by around 5 miles, while hidden deep in this forest, such a distance was already extremely safe. And with the passing of time, he would only become even more at ease. 2 hours. 4 hours. 6 hours later, In Ho finally gave up and began to search for his trail by eye. Following In Ho's search, the entire forest began to once more turn quiet. Long Chen also finally opened his closed eyes. Hee, In Ho, even if I can't beat you, I still have to properly play with you. Chapter 78 Long Chen's Gift. Seeing In Ho beginning to make his move, Long Chen also didn't wait around stupidly. He began to slowly sneak deeper into the forest. Long Chen's speed wasn't fast. He needed to be extremely careful. He did his best not to leave any signs of his trail. That would increase the difficulty of In Ho's search. He also couldn't make any noise. Otherwise, In Ho would definitely notice, and all his efforts would have been wasted. So Long Chen's fleeing speed was not that much different from In Ho's searching speed. Furthermore, Long Chen couldn't flee in just one direction. If In Ho decided to just rush straight forward upon seeing such a trail, he would be screwed. After all, this wasn't an ordinary game of hide and seek. Losing meant death. This was the first time Long Chen had ever felt so nervous. It was as if the Grim Reaper's sickle was constantly pressed right against his throat. Just the slightest carelessness could lead to his head tumbling to the ground. "I found you, Long Chen. Prepare to die." Ing Ho suddenly shouted out and rushed forward. Long Chen was extremely startled, but he then coldly smiled. His position was around 2 miles away from Ing Ho. That wasn't because Ing Ho was moving faster than Long Chen. Instead, it was because Long Chen needed to travel in a zigzag. So in a sense, the distance between them was still over 5 miles. Ing Ho was obviously lying. Suddenly jumping like that, an ordinary youth might really be scared and start fleeing as fast as he could. That was the real trap. But Long Chen just quietly hid under a huge tree, appreciating the play that this peak Phoenix Cry expert was putting on for him. But Long Chen didn't dare watching with his eyes. Ever since the Huayun Pavilion's auction, when Ing Ho had sensed him watching even through a wall, Long Chen had learned just how frighteningly perceptive the senses of experts were. Ing Ho tried his bluff several more times without the slightest bit of success. In the end, he had no choice but to return to his original location and continue searching for traces of Long Chen's trail. After all, no matter how careful Long Chen was, he was unable to fly. The ground, the grass, the rocks, the trees, they would all leave behind some sort of trail. But due to how smart Long Chen had acted, his tracks were not very obvious in some places and required a long time to search for in order to find his path. That exhausted a great deal of Ing Ho's time. Long Chen was actually conserving much more energy than Ing Ho, and Ing Ho was becoming increasingly infuriated. "Long Chen, just wait for when I catch you. I'll skin you and pull out each and every one of your muscles while you still live before turning your bones to ash." Ing Ho ground his teeth. He knew Long Chen was somewhere in the area and could hear him. He could even sense that Long Chen was hiding in a corner and laughing secretly at him. This caused him to feel even more anger. A grand muscle rebirth expert like him, one of the 3 apex experts of Phoenix Cry, was actually unable to kill a small chi condensation brat. If that got out, then he would immediately become the entire empire's laughingstock. He had a stomach full of anger without anywhere to release it. He had to maintain his calm, otherwise with the slightest negligence, Long Chen might really be able to flee from him. He could only continue to search for and follow his trail, while also keeping an ear on the surrounding silence. Long Chen sneered. "You want to skin me? Perhaps such a wish isn't as easy to achieve as you think." Seeing Ing Ho once more begin slowly searching, Long Chen continued going deeper into the forest. That was the best option. It was true that it might be possible for him to detour around Ing Ho and stealthily return to the valley and then the capital. And such an option was definitely tempting. But Long Chen had decided to give up on that thought for now. From his understanding of Ing Ho, he knew that he would have set up many traps before coming here. If he rashly went out the forest, that might just be walking right into his trap. His internal injuries were extremely severe. His right hand's meridians had been completely destroyed. He had perhaps just 1/10 of his normal combat ability. Just a couple random blood condensation experts possessed a fatal danger to him. So he had no choice but to suppress his desire to return to the capital. He continued deeper into the forest, carefully traveling in a zeech so that he could easily misguide Ing Ho, forcing him to travel even slower. After another 4 hours, the sky darkened. The entire forest became much gloomier and frightening. Occasionally the howls of ferocious beasts rang out. Long Chen's expression changed. If his luck was bad and he ended up being noticed by one of those beasts, although he wouldn't be killed by the beast, he would likely end up attracting Ing Ho over. That was the most frightening. Now that night had already arrived, many beasts had begun to come out of their lairs. Those beasts didn't know how difficult Long Chen would be to deal with. If they happened to consider him as food to prey on, that would be troublesome. Long Chen was hiding behind a stone rampart. Suddenly he heard some light sounds coming over, and sweeping his divine sense over, he felt a huge headache. At this time, it was so dark that he couldn't even see his own fingers in the dark. However, his spiritual strength could substitute for his eyes to see everything within dozens of meters of him extremely clearly. In front of him was a wolf around a meter tall. However, it was essentially a cub. Long Chun cursed his bad luck. Although this was just a wild beast and not a magical beast, if that cub ended up attacking him, even if he did manage to kill it in one blow, it would still cause a bit of noise. In this silent forest, such a noise was something that Ing Ho, with his muscle rebirth cultivation base, could not possibly miss. Especially not when he was quietly searching for his trail. Long Chun slowly took out a dagger from his ring. If that hungry wolf did end up coming at him, he absolutely had to kill it in one shot. But he had absolutely no confidence in being able to kill it without making the slightest noise. If it ended up letting out a miserable howl as it died, then it would be over for him. Man and wolf looked right at each other. Long Chun felt his sweat begin to drip. This face-to-face examination continued for several breaths when the wolf's nose suddenly sniffed slightly. It actually began to retreat and disappeared into the night. Long Chun was extremely puzzled when he suddenly remembered Little Snow. Having been in contact with that little fellow for so long, had some of his magical beast smell rubbed off on him and scared away the wolf. Wait, crap, Little Snow is still in the valley. He clapped himself in the forehead. He had actually forgotten about Little Snow. Before going to kill Xia Changfeng, he had hidden Little Snow inside a cave. But the situation had changed greatly from what he had imagined. Ing Ho's appearance had forced Long Chen and Amon to fight with all they had, yet in the end they were unable to defeat him. Long Chen had fled into the forest to draw Ing Ho away. Now that he suddenly thought of Little Snow, Long Chen prayed that Amon would for once be smart and remember to bring Little Snow away. The current Little Snow had eaten quite a bit of meat after being with Long Chen. He had already grown from being the size of a palm to being over a foot long. But that was still too small for him to survive on his own. Thinking of that adorable fellow, Long Chen actually had an urge to go back to the valley. But that was not a viable option. It was almost certain Ing Ho had set up other killers waiting for him around there. Long Chen's hatred of Ing Ho rose even higher now, however he was also helpless. Seeing that wolf retreat, Long Chen hastily moved a couple rocks over to completely hide himself. He would conceal his body and aura, which would allow him to avoid most of the beasts. Suddenly he heard distant roars. Long Chen smiled. Hee, it seemed Ing Ho truly was popular. Long Chen didn't dare kill that wolf because he was afraid of drawing over Ing Ho. Moreover, the death of such a beast would release a strong sense of blood that would attract countless predators. Those predators were the masters of this area. They were all able to easily smell blood within 5 miles. Not long after the first roar, other beasts had also come. Long Chen could even hear the sound of a blade slashing through the air. Hee, excellent. You just stay busy for now. I'll recover for a bit. Having hidden himself behind a stone rampart, he was extremely difficult to find. Now with Ing Ho having to fend off all the vicious beasts that were gathering around him, he was even more safe. He consumed 2 medicinal pills. One was to heal his inner wounds, while the other was to heal his meridians. As a pill cultivator, Long Chen naturally had prepared countless medicinal pills for himself. Now they finally had some use. And the medicinal pills he had reserved for his own use were extremely extravagant. They were all high-grade medicinal pills. Ever since obtaining the Beast Flame at the Phoenix Cry Lantern Festival, his flame strength had increased so much that Long Chen had completely replaced all his middle-grade medicinal pills. Now that he had consumed those 2 medicinal pills, he no longer had to be as worried about his inner wounds. As long as he had enough time, they would slowly recover. But the injury to his hands' meridians were somewhat troublesome. Meridians spread throughout the entire body, reaching every single place. It was precisely because of those canal-like meridians that spiritual qi could be sent anywhere in the body to release powerful strength. If it was an ordinary person's meridians were destroyed, they would essentially become a cripple. But Long Chen had a pill god's memories, so although this matter was a bit troublesome, it wasn't a huge obstacle. It just required some time to fix. Long Chen focused his medicinal pill's energy onto the endpoint of his wrist where the meridians had been damaged. Using spiritual strength and medicinal energy, he let the meridians regenerate. Letting meridians regenerate was an incredibly difficult process. In principle, it was simple. It was just allowing broken canals to once more grow along their old routes. But the difficulty was actually incredibly great. In the entire Phoenix Cry Empire, even including Grandmaster Yun Qi, there was no one other than Long Chen who could do so. Grandmaster Yun Qi could perhaps recover the finger's meridians because those were main meridians that many people remembered. But as for those extremely thin meridians that were no wider than a hair, those were something he was definitely unable of healing. And even if he did manage to mold those meridians out with his experience, they would be completely different from the old ones. But Long Chen's method was not the same. He was letting the meridians once more grow out extremely naturally, letting them follow their own paths that they remembered. Such a process was exceptionally slow, but to Long Chen, each millimeter they grew was another increase in his chances of survival. Long Chen focused his entire attention on recovering from his wounds. The entire night passed as he worked, and he only opened his eyes when it was once more daytime. Quietly opening the stone shelter he had built, he looked over in the direction where all those beast roars had come from and his stomach suddenly rumbled. Long Chen's eyes brightened and he suddenly smiled mischievously. "Ing Ho, this master is going to prepare a little gift for you." Chapter 79 Sending a Lump. Deep within the dense forest, Ing Ho was looking down at Long Chen's tracks. His expression was so dark that it was frightening. That was because he had realized Long Chen was extremely crafty. Sometimes he would purposely leave footprints to mislead him. He would follow those footprints and find that any trace of Long Chen completely disappeared after a while. After just a moment of thought, he realized that Long Chen must have backtracked into a previous location and once more fled in a different direction. These footprints were purposely a bit more clear to intentionally let Ing Ho see them. Now he had to go back and spend even more searching for where Long Chen had split off into a different direction. Ing Ho had a stomach full of anger with nowhere to release it. Long Chen was too cunning. Sometimes the footprints he left behind intentionally would actually be the direction he went, so Ing Ho couldn't even rule that out. In order to tell his true direction, Ing Ho had no choice but to patiently follow along slowly. He could sense Long Chen wasn't that far, but he was unable to find him. He was so angry that his lungs felt like they were about to explode. A whole day had already passed since they had entered the forest. Ing Ho was starting to get impatient, but he also had no way around this. He could only continue searching for his tracks. In just this manner, the two of them continued playing hide-and-seek in the endless forest. Although Long Chen had a slight advantage at this time, he didn't dare be the slightest bit overconfident. If Long Chen wanted to, he was actually able to quickly break away from Ing Ho's search. However, he refused to do that. He only continued to keep Ing Ho at a distance of 5 miles. That was the perfect distance from which a muscle rebirth expert could sense an enemy was in the vicinity, but would be unable to pinpoint that enemy's location. This was done intentionally by Long Chen. After sending Long Chen to kill Xia Changfeng, the fourth prince had sent Ing Ho to kill him. This meant the fourth prince was no longer worried about his father. In other words, the entire Long household was in danger. He had to continue this in order to stall Ing Ho. One reason for this stalling was that as long as Amon did what he had told him, he would quickly return to the capital. Amon would bring his household's people to the Alchemist Guild. With his relationship to Grandmaster Yun Qi would definitely not ignore them. At that time, even the fourth prince would have to reconsider whether he should make any moves against them. The other reason was that if Ing Ho continued not to return to the capital, the fourth prince who hadn't received a report of his death would definitely not attack the Long household. That was why Long Chen continued to risk his life to hold up Ing Ho. It was also why he had no other options. He had to do this. He carefully continued advancing. Long Chen suddenly saw a huge tree with a fist-sized beetle on it. Seeing that beetle, Long Chen's eyes brightened. He recognized that beetle as the horned bull beetle. That was because it had a horn on its nose that was just like a bull's horn. This was a very mildly tempered beetle. Its movements were especially slow. But it shouldn't be underestimated for being small. Its strength was actually greatly shocking. Just such a small beetle was capable of moving 10 to 20 kilograms. He smiled, "Hee hee, little guy, help me out a bit." Ignoring its outrage, Long Chen picked up the little beetle and placed it into his robes. Once more advancing another mile, he found a good location and stopped. He took out a thin thread from his spatial ring. That was black silk, and despite its thinness, it was extremely sturdy. Just one thread of it could withstand half a ton of force. He lightly twined the black silk around the bush. By tying it back with the black silk, the bush was just like an arm ready to pitch. Once it lost the force of the black silk, it would immediately shoot forward. Long Chen did all this extremely carefully. The slightest mistake might make a large enough noise to attract Ing Ho. But thinking about the result of this trap, if it worked, that little danger was definitely worth it. He finished setting up his slingshot. Looking around, both sides were covered by thorny thistles and there was only one straight path through this area. While people were rushing, they would naturally choose the easiest path. So this was the ideal place to place the trigger. Putting up a couple obstacles around his slingshot to protect it, he confirmed the distance. No matter how Ing Ho arrived, he would definitely step upon a certain route. He took out the horned beetle and bound one of its legs with the black silk. Placing it on top a large tree, the beetle began to slowly crawl, but it wasn't randomly crawling around. It was crawling up to a spot 10 meters up on the tree. That was because Long Chen had placed a petal from a butterfly orchid there. That was a kind of medicinal ingredient. That petal contained a very rich sweetness. It was also the favorite food of the horned bull beetle. Although that petal was half withered, with the beetle's amazing sense of smell, it immediately noticed it and began to crawl over to it with all its might. Its speed was extremely slow though. It only managed to reach there after the time it took for an incense stick to burn. But just as it was preparing to eat its favorite food, Long Chen picked up the pitiful fellow and pulled it away. Long Chen made some calculations and tied a knot over the beetle, keeping it in place. That knot had a small loop in it. If that loop was touched, then the knot would immediately loosen, releasing it. After carefully setting up all these preparations, he placed a small stone on the other side of the black silk. He confirmed everything was set. Once the beetle crawled up to the butterfly orchid's petal, it would activate and release the knot, causing the stone to fall to the ground. Long Chen once more looked over his trap from start to end. A strange smile appeared on his face. He found a large leaf and then sneakily hid behind a large tree. He watched for a moment as the beetle continued according to its original route, crawling towards the petal. But due to it not pulling on a stone, its speed had slowed down a bit. Long Chen nodded and quietly retreated. Now there was only one tiny crucial item remaining. As for whether the trap would succeed, that would depend on Ing Ho. He stealthily disappeared deeper into the forest. An hour later, Ing Ho, who was searching for any of Long Chen's tracks, suddenly heard a strange sound, the sound of a stone rolling. That sound was extremely quiet, but within the keen listening ears of Ing Ho, it was practically like a thunderclap. Ing Ho didn't even think about it before rushing over. He was just like a wild gale, and 3 or 4 miles was instantly traversed. That sound had definitely not been natural. He knew it was the sound of someone accidentally tripping on a stone. Within this silent forest, other than him, the only one who would make such a noise was Long Chen. Thinking of Long Chen, flames of fury rose inside him. Last night he hadn't gotten the slightest bit of sleep and hadn't even had time to rest his wounds. Those damn beasts had become enraged and continuously attacked him. Although they were unable to pose any danger to him, they had troubled his internal injury. It was impossible for a medicinal pill alone to completely heal his injury. He had to combine it with spiritual qi in order to recover. But he hadn't had any time or opportunity to do so. He was forced into being unable to maintain his peak combat ability, causing him to feel a great sense of unease. So he urgently needed to kill Long Chen and return to the capital to recover. In just a couple breaths' time, Ho arrived at where the sound had come from. But there was no sign of Long Chen anywhere. Under a tree was the rock that had made the noise, and it seemed the rock had writing on it. Ho looked over the surroundings and his expression became ugly when he saw no sign of Long Chen. He knew that he had most likely been played. He slowly walked over to that rock, wanting to know what Long Chen had wanted to show to him. He had just walked a couple steps when he suddenly stepped on a string that activated the short brush not far from him. A ball of something wrapped in a green leaf shot towards him. Ho coldly laughed and raised his sword, slicing that ball in half. "Oof, you little insect dash." He hadn't expected that the moment his sword touched that ball, the ball exploded, filling the air with juice. Due to that happening so fast and being so close, Ho was unable to get away in time and was completely drenched by that juice. An incomparably disgusting smell filled the air. Some of it had also gotten into his mouth, so now his mouth was also full of that disgusting stink. Ho hastily retreated, his first thought being that it was poison. But although that thing had been incomparably disgusting, it didn't have a trace of poison in it. His spiritual qi was circulating completely normally. Now that he had time, he noticed that the rock on the ground had flipped over to reveal the following words. "Just a small gift which is unworthy of you. Originally I wanted to send you a large turd, but recently my stomach hasn't been feeling well. Please forgive my helplessness." Looking at the words, Ho's face suddenly turned completely white. Looking at the sticky residue left on his clothes, his stomach began to heave and he vomited. "Long Chen." Ho's incredibly angry roar practically blew apart the clouds. It caused the entire forest to shake and countless birds and beasts were frightened into flight. Long Chen was on a distant large tree watching those birds. He smiled heartily. A bit of his anger from being chased by Ho was finally relieved. Ever since that day, Ho's face became even more dark and Long Chen became even more careful, not daring to set up such a trap again. If he ended up making slight mistake when setting it up, he would definitely be doomed. That small trap had been to relieve his anger and to increase his self-confidence. Since he had managed to do that, it wouldn't be smart to set something like that up again. Only by being careful could he survive. He didn't want the advantage he had worked so hard to create to be reversed. One fled while one chased. 8 days quickly passed. Over that time, Long Chen fled during the day and recuperated during the night after using all kinds of techniques to hide from the wild beasts. Due to the assistance of his medicinal pills, Long Chen's recovery was extremely quick. His right hand's meridians had almost completely recovered. His inner injuries had also nearly healed. Ever since the first night where he had drawn over many beasts, Ho had become smarter and also rested during the night. He would jump up into a high tree, using the time to rest and heal his wounds. His efficiency was also very fast. This continued up till the 9th day. Long Chen was crossing a small stream when he sensed a strange movement above his head. Looking up, his expression greatly changed. "Crap, I'm screwed." Chapter 80 Final Showdown. On the 9th day, Long Chen's expression suddenly changed. There was simply a monkey at the top of a large tree. It wasn't very large, but its throat was extremely thick. It was looking at Long Chen guardedly. Long Chen immediately didn't even dare to move. He couldn't help feeling endless regret. Having played around with Ho with that gift before, he had actually grown too careless. That monkey was just an ordinary beast. It didn't have any attacking strength, but it was precisely this monkey which caused Long Chen to enter a huge crisis. That monkey was a beast that liked to live in large groups. This part of the forest was obviously their territory, and that monkey should be a sentry. As soon as they sensed intruders or danger, they would immediately let out a loud howl to alert their comrades. Long Chen hadn't been paying enough attention to his surroundings and ended up running into their territory. He immediately realized he had made an inexcusable mistake. He began to slowly retreat, showing that he was leaving immediately. But it was already too late. That monkey let out a loud howl from atop that tree, its voice immediately spreading out dozens of miles. Long Chen's face sunk. If he had been in range, he definitely would have immediately crushed that monkey in anger. The entire forest began to echo with more alarmed calls. Long Chen's pupils suddenly shrunk. From the distance, a figure was rushing over straight towards Long Chen. He could now see Ing Ho, whose eyes were filled with killing intent. Now that Ing Ho had already found him, running would be useless. Long Chen directly gave up any thoughts of escaping. Since he was already found, other methods were now useless. Now the only option was to risk his life. Long Chen, if I don't turn your bones to ashes, then I won't be surnamed Ing. Ing Ho arrived in just the blink of an eye. The current Ing Ho's eyes were practically about to spit out flames. Each one of the past 8 days had felt like a year. Particularly that gift Long Chen had sent him had caused the originally extremely immaculate Ing Ho to almost want to kill himself. Although he hadn't eaten a thing in 8 days, he was still constantly vomiting. It seemed as if he wanted to even vomit out all his stomach contents. It could be said that Ing Ho's hatred of Long Chen had already surpassed his hatred for Long Tianxiao. Seeing Long Chen standing right in front of him now, his body was incessantly shivering. As for the reason for that, perhaps only Ing Ho knew it. Whether or not you're surnamed Ing has nothing to do with me. I'm not your dad. Long Chen shook his head. The broadsword once more reappeared in his hands. Words had no meanings anymore. Having been on edge constantly over the past few days, his heart had actually calmed down now that he was facing Ing Ho. He sensed that his current state had already reached his previous peak, so there was nothing to fear. It even seemed as if his cultivation realm had increased a level. That was an extremely mysterious feeling. He couldn't clearly explain it. But under Ing Ho's constant pursuit, the scent of death had never been far. It felt as if he had transformed after that experience. Ha, are you provoking me now in hopes of me giving you a quick death? Stop dreaming. I'll make it so you live a life worse than death, a life that will make you regret ever being born in this world. Ing Ho's face was extremely sinister. I don't need to provoke you. How was the taste of the gift I sent you last time? Lightly asked Long Chen. Hearing the word gift, Ing Ho's face immediately whitened and his stomach once more began to heave. I'll kill you. Ing Ho angrily shouted and his sword sliced through the air towards Long Chen. Long Chen was long since prepared. He also sent his sword slashing forward. Bang! Long Chen was sent back a dozen steps before being able to stabilize himself. His blood and qi were in an upheaval inside. Looking at Ing Ho, he saw that he had only taken 3 steps back. He sighed. Muscle rebirth experts truly were a huge level above. His current strength had recovered to over 90%, but he was still not an equal match for Ing Ho. Even in terms of his brute strength, he was completely unmatched by Ing Ho. That was a clear difference. That was also why amongst the countless cultivators in Phoenix Cry, Ing Ho was at the absolute apex. On the other side, Ing Ho's eyes narrowed when he saw that Long Chen was actually able to block his blow. Alchemists truly did have ample preparations. When Long Chen had fled back then, he had already been halfway dead. But now he had mostly recovered. It was obviously Long Chen had consumed quite a few medicinal pills. But as for Ing Ho, he wasn't an alchemist and his cultivation base was too high for most medicinal pills to work on him, so effective medicinal pills were extremely rare treasures for him. This caused an intense envy inside of him. If he was also an alchemist or had such medicinal pills, how would it be possible for him to have still yet to recover to 70% even after all these days? Thinking of that, Ing Ho felt that the heavens truly were unfair. Within the same generation as him was Long Tianxiao, who had completely suppressed him, making it difficult for him to stand out. And then Long Tianxiao had had an amazing son who had become a pill apprentice at a young age and was also a shockingly talented genius in terms of the martial path. Compared to Long Tianxiao, he was a failure. His eyes reddened and green veins exploded out on his body. Coldly shouting and raising his sword qi filled the air and shook the heavens. Long Chen took a deep breath. The current Ing Ho was acting like a madman. Now that he was using his full strength to attack, Long Chen would be unable to block. Touching his ring, he took out 2 medicinal pills. He threw one of them into his mouth and swallowed it. The other one was rubbed alone his broadsword using his spiritual strength. Ho had been able to see him swallow a medicinal pill, and he assumed that Long Chen was using it to heal injuries. But the second medicinal pill had been hidden and silently spread across the broadsword's back. It had been impossible for Ho to see. Ho's sword was already crashing down upon him. Long Chen roared and also slashed out. In terms of sword techniques, Ho could play around with Long Chen as much as he wanted to. But the broadsword in Long Chen's hands was so long that it was a perfect counter to such a thing. So Ho's beautiful techniques were completely useless. Boom! The two swords collided and there was a huge explosion. A faint red gas immediately spread out and immediately enveloped an area of 30 meters. The two of them were immediately swallowed by it. Ah! That red gas invaded Ho's body and he immediately let out a miserable scream. His exposed skin felt as if hot iron was branding it and the intense pain was simply unbearable. Not only that, but the red gas seemed to come alive and was doing its best to force its way into his body through his skin. Even though he had reacted at the very most moment and stopped breathing it in, it was absolutely useless. And that red gas also possessed an extremely terrifying corrosive nature. Blisters were quickly appearing on his skin. His flesh was rotting at a speed he could see with his naked eye. "You used poison?" angrily asked a shocked Ho. "What do you think?" Long Chen coldly laughed, but he also wasn't that well off. The poison pill refined from the heartrot grass was extremely powerful. Even he himself was unable to block it. Although he had taken antitoxin pill, he was unable to completely defend against that poisonous gas. His body was also harmed and turned red as if he was being boiled. But he was still better off than Ho. That antitoxin pill allowed him to not have to worry about the poisonous gas corroding his heart. That was the most terrifying aspect of the poison pill refined from heartrot grass. That poison pill was his strongest life-saving measure. Ho truly was too powerful, so he had no choice but to use it. Ho angrily roared and tried to send a full-force attack at Long Chen. But his expression greatly changed. Just as he began to circulate his spiritual qi, the poisonous gas that had just entered through his skin suddenly quickly spread throughout his body and then straight for his heart. This completely terrified Ho. If such a powerful poison invaded his heart, even he, a muscle rebirth expert, would not be able to live for more than a few moments. He hastily took out a medicinal pill from his ring and swallowed it. When Long Chen saw that pill, his expression changed. He hadn't expected Ho to possess such a medicinal pill. Just from its luster and the fragrance being emitted from it, Long Chen could identify that pill to be a snow toad yaoan. The snow toad was an extremely rare magical beast. It didn't have a crystal core like other magical beasts. All its essence was focused on its niden. The snow toad was also a kind of poisonous beast. A matured snow toad was a second-rank magical beast. The poisonous mist it spit out could immediately cover an area of hundreds of meters. The poisonous mist was able to poison other magical beasts to death and cause all vegetation to wither away. It was extremely frightening. But it was precisely because its poisonous gas was so powerful that even it was unable to endure it. Thus its niden was used to help it survive even its own poison. Snow toads were an extremely rare kind of magical beast from which both poison and antitoxins could be extracted. The snow toad yaoan that could be refined from the snow toad's niden could cure hundreds of poisons. It was an extremely precious medicinal pill. Who would have thought that Ho would actually have had the chance to obtain it? Although it was said to resolve hundreds of poisons, it was mostly just a partial cure. But just resolving part of the poison was enough to reverse a person's fate. Long Chen, you actually forced me to use a precious pill that I've hidden away for half my life. Give me your life as the price. Ho's face was extremely twisted now. That pill was something he had obtained as a youth and had continuously hidden. But now because of a qi condensation weakling like Long Chen, he was forced to use it. His heart was practically dripping blood. Seeing that the snow toad yaoan was actually able to temporarily suppress the poisonous gas's attack on his heart, Long Chen was greatly alarmed. Ho charged at him, and in response, all 12 of his cyclones began to wildly spin, releasing his full strength. His sword danced in the air, meeting Ingho head-on. Boom! 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 Consecutive exchanges caused explosive chi waves that flattened the huge trees around them, the power in just the aftershocks being absolutely shocking. Long Chen felt his arm turn numb under Ingho's full-force attacks. Blood stained the corner of his mouth and his internal organs were starting to be affected. But at this time, Long Chen still ground his teeth and continued to endure. He knew that the snow-toad ball would not be able to suppress his poison pill forever. Bang! Long Chen was sent flying, vomiting blood. But Ingho didn't have the slightest happiness on his face. Instead he was filled with horror. Hee, have you finally noticed? Did you really think the poison pill refined by me, Long Chen, was so easy to resolve? Long Chen wiped off the blood on his mouth and coldly laughed. The moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. The snow-toad Yaoan could resolve hundreds of poisons and its effectiveness was definitely shockingly high. But that was mostly for beast poisons. However, Long Chen's poison pill had been mostly refined from the heartrot grass. This caused the effectiveness of the snow-toad Yaoan to sharply drop. A murderous aura overflowed from Ingho. Taking a deep breath, he raised his sword and a terrifying aura filled the sword. Killing intent engulfed the forest. Even so, I'll still kill you. His sword shot through the air. The terrifying power behind it cut through the space and released a sharp splitting sound. With endless killing intent, it slashed towards Long Chen. Void-breaking slash. A Niden should be similar to a Dantian. Ni equals inner, Den equals pill/ball. The Niden is actually a real thing in the sense that it is similar to a Dantian. Since I cringe whenever someone translates Dantian as elixir field or whatever, I just kept it Niden as Niden instead of translating it into something like inner pill. The Niden is part of the school of thought that considers heaven and man as integral parts of a whole. Use the body as a cauldron and use your essence, spirit, and chi as medicinal ingredients. Use heaven as the heat to refine the medicine inside the body into a pills. Chapter 81. Both sides heavily wounded. Void-breaking slash. Waves of chi completely constricted Long Chen. That sword seemed completely unstoppable. That was Ingho's most powerful sword technique. Long Chen knew that it was definitely also an Earth-class battle skill, and it was even more terrifying than the one he had used before. The powerful aura completely locked him in place. Facing death, Long Chen's mind was completely calm. He entered a strange state at this moment. He seemed to have grasped everything within heaven and earth. 10,000 laws and daos, every single creature and object, everything was clearly captured within his mind right now. He felt as if he had already escaped from his body and was looking on as an observer. What Long Chen didn't know at this time was that his Feng Fu star had become completely static at this time as if it was waiting for some kind of enlightenment. It was a shame that Long Chen hadn't noticed. Spiritual chi rushed towards his 12 cyclones. They explosively grew and a cord-like energy surged through Long Chen's meridians to enter the broadsword in his hands. Split the heavens. Strange lines appeared over the broadsword and it seemed to come alive. It cut through a mysterious arc, imposing just like an overpowering dragon. This was Long Chen's strongest attack. Boom. Waves of chi exploded outwards. Both of them were sent flying back, blood filling the sky. Long Chen's broadsword had been sent flying back hundreds of meters, only stopping once it sunk deep into a boulder. Vomiting out blood, Long Chen felt that his whole body was about to collapse and his aura plummeted. A dozen cuts appeared on his body from which blood unceasingly flowed out of. But what was worse was that his entire body's meridians had been cracked, just a bit away from completely breaking apart. And this was after Long Chen had gained the experience of using Split the Heavens last time. So when he used it this time, he had used his entire body's meridians in order to brunt the explosive force that came from it. But because he had used even greater force that last time, he was really only just the slightest bit away from truly becoming a completely crippled person. It was possible to regrow a small portion of destroyed meridians. That was because you could follow the memories of the meridians before it. But if all the meridians in the body were destroyed, even with a pill god's memories, Long Chen would be completely powerless to fix it. The current him was now unable to use even the slightest trace of spiritual qi. His cracked meridians were unable to bear any force at the moment. On the other side, Ing Ho's condition was not that much better than Long Chen's. The sword in his hand had shattered explosively, its fragments cutting into both of them. If it was just outer wounds, then Ing Ho would still be able to use his powerful cultivation base to suppress them. But having used his most powerful attack just now, he had lost control of the extremely toxic poison inside him. Only the slightest trace of that corrosive poison had entered his heart just now. But just that slight trace caused his heart to show signs of withering. That completely terrified Ing Ho, and he hastily used his spiritual qi to defend against the poison's invasion. Long Chen took a deep breath and slowly stood up. Going over to his broadsword, he pulled it out of the rock, and slowly began to walk over to Ing Ho. He could see a bit of blackness on Ing Ho's forehead. That was one of the signs that the poison had reached his heart. It also meant that Ing Ho was like him and couldn't use his spiritual qi. Now he would use his powerful physical body to go kill Ing Ho. Long Chen wanted to rush over and split him in two, but his body was unbearably weak. Blood was flowing from the dozen wounds caused by Ing Ho's shattered sword. If it weren't for his powerful physical body, he would have already run out of blood. But even so, bursts of dizziness caused him to feel as if he might faint at any time. But he couldn't fall just yet. Even though he was already out of energy, his eyes were still calm without the slightest trace of emotion as he slowly walked towards Ing Ho. Ing Zhao, now the one who will die is you. Long Chen raised his sword and slashed down at Ing Ho. Ing Ho was worried to see that Long Chen still had the strength to come attack him. He hastily rolled to the side. When the broadsword slashed right past his cheeks, it was so close that he could feel the icy coldness coming from it. Damn, he actually still has so much strength. Ing Ho's expression finally changed. That was the first time he had felt fear from an insignificant qi condensation ant. He was especially afraid of Long Chen's completely calm eyes. Long Chen was just like a deep well. He only revealed the slightest bit on the surface, but as for how deep he was, no one knew. Ing Ho could sense the steady killing intent overflowing from him. Now he was at an absolute disadvantage. Without his spiritual qi, he was not a match for Long Chen's physical body. Just treat it as you being lucky today. Ing Ho coldly sneered and actually turned to flee. You want to run? Leave behind your life first. Long Chen shouted and charged forward in chase. However, the broadsword in his hand was too heavy and he was actually unable to catch up. In just a few short moments, he had already lost Ing Ho's tail. Seeing Ing Ho disappear, the anger on Long Chen's face faded to be replaced by relief. He suddenly felt the world spinning around him and his vision blackened as he lost consciousness. Ing Ho was celebrating that Long Chen was unable to catch up to him. Long Chen's physical body might be powerful, but his attacking strength resided with that broadsword. Now that broadsword had become a burden and caused him to be unable to catch up to him, letting Ing Ho relax. However, he didn't know that Long Chen was actually completely spent. He had used up all his final energy to put on an act to scare him off. In the end, Ing Ho really was duped. After fleeing madly for a while, Ing Ho suddenly felt his heart begin to violently beat. He realized his own spiritual qi was starting to run out and was unable to suppress the poison. He hastily took out a couple medicinal pills and swallowed them. The snow-toad Yaowan's medicinal energy was already starting to decline, but it had only countered an incredibly small portion of Long Chen's poison. He would definitely still die if he didn't promptly neutralize it. Now Ing Ho could no longer even bother to think about Long Chen. His own life was more important. Over 200 miles were traversed by him in just a day. He finally left the forest and arrived at a camp. Ing-ho let out a breath of relief when he saw the camp. When the patrolling guards saw Ing-ho covered in blood and on his last legs, they were all scared stupid. Was that really the Ing-ho who was practically like a god to them? Ing-ho grabbed one of those guards who appeared to be a squad leader and hastily spit out, "Split up your troops and sweep the entire forest. When you see him, you must kill him. Bring him back to the capital." After saying that, Ing-ho was unable to persevere and fainted. That squad only then reacted, quickly carrying away Ing-ho and sending a report to the higher-ups. Returning back to the third day after Long Chen had killed Xia Changfeng, the fourth prince held a secret report and a light smile appeared on his face. "Long Chen, you really didn't disappoint me." Lightly putting down the report, he raised a cup of tea on the table and calmly drank a sip. Suddenly his door was opened and a white-robed man walked in. Seeing that white-robed man, the fourth prince smiled slightly. "I've already prepared some tea for you. But you came a bit later than I expected, so it might not be perfect. Please, have some first and don't take offense." That white-robed eyes had been icy cold and filled with killing intent, but because of the fourth prince's words, he became somewhat startled. "You know who I am?" he icily asked. "I know a bit." "Then do you know why I've come here?" "To kill me," lightly replied the fourth prince. Those words which would cause a person's heart to jump in fear were actually said with extreme calmness. "If you know I came here to kill you, why are you so calm?" The white-robed man's eyes narrowed. "Because I know you can't kill me." "Ha, if I wanted to kill you, even all the people in the capital added together would be unable to stop me," coldly laughed the white-robed man. "It's not a question of being able to block you. That's because I don't need to block you. I know you won't kill me." The fourth prince was completely certain. "Oh, well, I'd like to hear a bit more about that." Apparently the white-robed man had become a bit interested in what the fourth prince had to say. "For one thing, I bet that Xia Changfeng wasn't the most cooperative partner. He was an imbecile, and so he had to die." "Continue." "Now you have a better partner, someone who can serve you much better, someone who can complete twice the work with half the effort." "You mean yourself?" "Correct. And you're proof of that." "The proof is that I have an overall comprehension of your guys' plans. I know how you can win without the slightest blood." The fourth prince was completely sure of himself. Seeing that the white-robed man didn't say anything, the fourth prince continued, "You've been setting your plan in motion for over 20 years. Ever since the beginning when you sent my mother to marry the Phoenix Cry Emperor, you've done everything extremely carefully. Your goal was to not attract too much movement. You used me and my mother to succeed in controlling the entire Phoenix Cry Empire. The Emperor is already dead and the Empress Dowager is under my mother's control. The people who know this secret are all our people, with the exception of Long Tianxiao. So the only person that we need to worry about is Long Tianxiao. But Long Tianxiao has refused to surrender to us after all these years. He seemed to have also sensed some clues that raised his guard. He has always refused to return to the capital. So right now, Long Tianxiao is the greatest obstacle in your plans. Am I correct?" The white-robed man frowned. "Everything you said is useless. You might as well have not said anything." The fourth prince smiled slightly. "What if I said that I could resolve the problem of Long Tianxiao? Would that still be useless words?" "You can do that." "I've never done anything I wasn't sure of. I was born in Phoenix Cry, destined to be a chess piece. I've already endured the lifestyle of underhanded schemes that cannot see the day. So I want to cooperate with you. I'll help you handle Long Tianxiao, and you help me become emperor." The fourth prince's breathing became a bit heavy at this point. Obviously, this was an extremely tense moment. Although he was also a prince, he had really been born into this world with a mission to be a spy. He would forever be like a ghost, never allowed to see the true light. He had been suppressed for too long. He needed to be set free. When he had seen Xia Changfeng's abusing his power arrogantly like an idiot, he had decided that he would kill that bastard and make himself the white-robed man's partner. The white-robed man looked at the fourth prince. What's your bargaining chip? The fourth prince celebrated inside when he saw that the white-robed man hadn't declined. Full of confidence, he handed something over to him. Seeing that thing, the white-robed man was shocked. Chapter 82 The Fourth Prince's Lofty Ambition. That was an animal hide page. There were countless symbols drawn into the page. They didn't seem exactly like words, but they weren't exactly not. You can communicate with the barbarian tribes? The white-robed man asked with astonishment. The barbarian tribes were precisely called barbarian because they lived just like wild beasts. But they had their own crude culture and language. These ugly symbols were precisely the barbarian tribe's script. Many people had seen that script before, but they had no idea how to read them. It was completely unexpected for the fourth prince to be able to. One's full effort must be invested into achieving one's goals for there to be profit. Ever since I was young, I could see through my own destiny. At that time I had already started gathering the bargaining chips that would change my destiny. I sent countless people to the barbarian tribes in order to try joining them, but they only treated those people as food. But there are always exceptions in this world. One person was actually accepted into the barbarian tribes. Then I started to gradually gain a connection to the barbarian tribe's power. While fulfilling our missions, my mother and I also raised our own power. To tell the truth, 3 years ago I already had the power to help you seize the Phoenix Cry Empire without the slightest drop of blood, but that wouldn't have brought me even the slightest benefits. The white-robed man nodded. Continue. So, in order to handle Long Tianxiao, I purposely stopped supplying him reinforcements. I also secretly drew the poor people in the vicinity towards Long Tianxiao's army. I raised Long Tianxiao's prestige in secret, letting everyone think he was a god who would protect them. I know what kind of person Long Tianxiao is. He definitely wouldn't sacrifice the lives of those commoners. The fourth prince indifferently raised his teacup and took a sip. Chu Xia, you really are talented. That was the first time the white-robed man praised the fourth prince. It could be said that the fourth prince's move had been exceptionally brilliant. He had used the lives of the ordinary commoners to effortlessly lock Long Tianxiao in place. Most importantly, that was a ploy without a solution. Even if Long Tianxiao understood it, he was helpless. He was unable to ignore the lives of millions of commoners. Such a simple scheme had kept Long Tianxiao permanently locked at the border. Even the white-robed man felt a bit of admiration. Unfortunately, those barbarian tribes truly did cause me disappointment. I secretly sent them so much assistance in terms of food and supplies, but they are still only just able to fight on the same level as Long Tianxiao. So they ended up in a permanent battle of attrition. But I suppose that is all that can be expected from those uncivilized barbarians. The fourth prince shook his head. The white-robed man pondered for a moment before asking, I want to know, just what is Long Chen's current condition? He should already be dead. If my calculations are correct, his head should be en route back to the capital. That Long Chen really is an oddity. But I'm not someone who likes the unexpected, so I sent Ing Ho over. I trust that you know Ing Ho's power. The white-robed man's expression changed slightly. I know of him. His cultivation base can count as not bad. But using him to handle a small qi condensation cultivator is making a bit too big of a fuss for a minor nuisance. The fourth prince's expression didn't change. But hearing what he said, it seemed that even the muscle rebirth realm Ing Ho wasn't even placed into his eyes. From that, it could be seen that this young man whose age didn't seem that different from his own had to possess an extremely terrifying strength. The fourth prince's guard went up even higher. I've already said I'm a cautious person. I won't do anything I'm not sure of. It's just like how I used Long Chen to kill that idiot Xia Changfeng this time. The white-robed man nodded. You really are much better than Xia Changfeng. I can overlook Xia Changfeng's death and also accomplish your wish. However, if you end up being worse than Xia Changfeng, I can tell you very clearly that even your own death will become something you are unable to control. The white-robed man's gentle manner of speaking became dark, and a strange aura filled the air. The fourth prince ignored his threat. Don't worry, I've endured patiently for many years just for this chance. I treasure this opportunity even more than you. Then good. With Long Chen dead now, I need to know what your plan is for later. Although he didn't underestimate Long Chen, but in front of a muscle rebirth expert, Long Chen would definitely not even have the slightest chance of surviving. Ying Zhao will bring his head back to the capital as well as a recording of Long Chen killing Xia Changfeng. Then I will need you to communicate with the Grand Xia and get them to send out their elite army to surround the capital. At that time, I will call back Ying Ho and Wu Ho here. The Grand Xia will demand us to hand over the murderer, and in order for both empires to stay friends, I can offer up every person in the Long household in a justifiable manner. In fact, I can kill all of them at a suitable time, explained the fourth prince. What do you mean by a suitable time? And furthermore, when you sage them, it seems you aren't just talking about the Long household? Lightly asked the white-robed man. The fourth prince laughed. Speaking with a smart person really does save energy. Correct. Before I execute the people from the Long household, I have to have the barbarian tribes attack Long Tianxiao Station at the same time. At that time, I will send news of his family being executed. In the face of the barbarian tribe's invasion and with the lives of countless commoners on the line, he definitely won't bring his whole army back to the capital. According to my understanding of him, he will leave his entire army back there to guard and come back to the capital alone to rescue his family. At that time, Ying Ho and Wu Ho will join hands to kill him without a problem. Furthermore, we'll even have an honorable reason for doing so it won't cause any huge ripples. As for them, I naturally mean those people who aren't suitable of being near me. Long Chen has received the Crown Prince's support in killing Xia Changfeng. One of his close guards will testify to that. At that time, we just have to gather a bit of evidence. In order for the two great empires to remain allies, even the Crown Prince can be used as a sacrifice. And as for his henchmen, although they didn't directly participate, they are definitely extremely suspicious. In order to maintain the empire's friendship, it's best to just also sacrifice them as well. The white-robed man stared at the fourth prince for a great deal of time before sighing, "What profound scheming! In that way, the entire Phoenix Cry Empire will easily land in your hands. Chu Xia, you really are a genius. Many thanks for the praise. But you don't have to worry, my spirit root is completely ordinary and I'm unable to walk the cultivation path. I don't possess the slightest threat to you," said the fourth prince. The white-robed man smiled slightly. He had already secretly examined the fourth prince's body and found that his talent truly was extremely ordinary. Towards such an intelligent and deeply scheming person, he definitely had to be a bit more careful. He definitely didn't want to unwittingly fall into someone else's trap. If the fourth prince was an extremely talented person in terms of cultivation, then he would definitely possess an extremely great threat to him. Who knew whether or not the fourth prince would end up using him to step into even higher realms? Now all his misgivings were dispelled. The fourth prince was incapable of cultivating to a high level. All he cared about was the secular world's power. It was just like he had said, both of them needed each other. Gently raising his teacup, the white-robed man smiled. Excellent, Xia Changfeng's death truly is a good thing. I hope we can happily cooperate. The fourth prince also raised his teacup. The two of them toasted and drained their cups in one gulp. The white-robed suddenly thought of a matter. Doesn't Xia Changfeng have a little sister? Is she still in the imperial palace? A bit of disgust appeared on the fourth prince's face. Yes, that idiot woman was left behind by Xia Changfeng in order to control us. You didn't want to kill her? Well, she is a pill apprentice and has a particular status. I got her two handsome, strong men to wait on her. She's busy with them and won't bring any big trouble to us. The white-robed man nodded. That Xia Baiqi truly was a complete idiot. He relaxed knowing that the fourth prince had handled her. As for the death of her brother, she definitely wouldn't care about that. They had never had any family love to speak of. As long as nothing bad happened to her, then she wouldn't care. Furthermore, Xia Changfeng was killed by Long Chen. Even if she did feel some hatred, that hatred would land on Long Chen. Right, Brother Luo, I have something I want to ask your help for. After the two of them had reached a common understanding, the fourth prince had directly switched to calling him brother. Speak. You also know that in order for me to control Ing Ho and Wu Ho, they have been promised that once this matter is accomplished, they will get half of the empire. Back then when I promised them I was fine with it since I didn't have any hope of obtaining the empire. So being generous with them also didn't cause me any pain. But now all of Phoenix Cry is about to land into my hands. How can I allow others to control my land? So, you want me to help you bring them under your control? Pretty much. I hope Brother Luo can teach me how to make them listen to me obediently and also not have them form any thoughts of rebellion, carefully said the fourth prince. The white-robed man laughed. Chuxia, you are ruthless. You really are willing to do anything to achieve your goals. Okay, I promise you that once this matter is finished, I'll teach you a technique that will let you make those two into your slaves. Hearing that, the fourth prince was overjoyed. Now everything was going according to his plans. With the final part of the plan about to be finished, Ing Ho and Yu Ho had become his greatest problem. Back then he had promised to give them control of half the empire. That was equivalent to them being local emperors. That was how Ing Ho and Wu Ho had been coaxed by the fourth prince's carrot and stick persuasions to secretly form an agreement. But only the three of them had known about it. Now the fourth prince had obtained an opportunity to free himself from that. He naturally was unwilling to have others control his empire. The white-robed man's promise meant he no longer needed to be worried about that. Although the fourth prince didn't have a complete understanding of the white-robed man, he knew his origin was definitely shocking and beyond his imaginations. So he needed to rely on him. As long as he had the white-robed man's support, whether it was the Phoenix Cry Empire of the Grand Xia Empire, he would be able to have whatever he wanted. Now everything was prepared. They only needed one last thing. Once Ing Ho came back, the final phase of the plan could commence. But what they didn't know was that in this world, there was also one thing in this world that never went away. Those were called mishaps. Chapter 83 Mysterious Voice. When Long Chen once more opened his eyes, he had no idea how much time had passed. Perhaps it had just been an hour, perhaps it had been a whole day. He had been roused by the sound of those howling monkeys. Looking over his body, most of the blood on his wounds had already dried. That was definitely something to feel lucky about. Otherwise, he would definitely have died if all his blood had kept flowing out. Standing up, he felt the world spinning around him and almost fell to the ground again. Leaning against a large tree, he had to wait for a while before feeling a little better. Raising his head to look around, he saw that there were dozens of monkeys on the crowns of the trees. Several of them were howling as loud as they could. Long Chen knew that most likely meant something had invaded this part of the forest. However, was that thing a beast or human? But no matter what, either was a threat to Long Chen. With a wave of his hand, he placed the broadsword into his spatial ring. Looking over his wounds, he ground his teeth and consumed a medicinal pill. Just that slight raise of his hand caused some of his wounds to tear open. Blood immediately flowed out. The wound actually had fragments of Ing Ho's sword still. Being made from cold iron, those fragments were definitely extremely dangerous to the body. They couldn't be left inside for too long. Although this wasn't the best place to handle them, if he let them stay in his body for longer, they would greatly hinder his movements. Long Chen first consumed a couple blood-clotting pills and did his best to keep the flow of blood at a minimum. If he lost too much blood, then he wouldn't have the energy to walk. With his skillful effort, Long Chen dug out over a dozen sword fragments from his body in a short time. Those were part of Ing Ho's shattered sword. Both Long Chen and Ing Ho had been hit by them. After taking out those sword fragments, Long Chen still felt extremely dizzy, a sign he had lost too much blood. Looking up at the trees and hearing that their howls were becoming increasingly loud, Long Chen knew the targets in their eyes were quickly approaching. Consuming a couple medicinal pills, he dragged his exhausted body down the mountain. Now that Ing Ho had fled, he also needed to quickly find a place to heal his wounds. In that final exchange with Ing Ho, he had used Split the Heavens. that had caused his entire body's meridians to crack, and he was unable to use spiritual chi. This was his weakest point. He went over 10 miles down a mountain when a river dozens of meters wide appeared before him. Long Chen looked around and saw a wide fallen tree. He pushed that tree into the water. That tree had been dead for a long time and floated very well in the water. Long Chen crawled on top. This way he could allow his body to be carried down the river without letting the water touch his wounds. Otherwise the river water would cause his wounds to become even worse. Luckily the river flowed very steadily. Long Chen could easily stay atop the tree. He flowed along the river for a full day. In a drowsy state, he was suddenly awakened by a loud, continuous booming sound. Long Chen hastily paddled to the shore. Looking ahead, he was given a big fright as he saw the waterfall before him. That waterfall was hundreds of meters high. If he had been a bit later and fallen down, he would definitely have been done for. The river had yet to exit the forest. Long Chen knew he had to quickly find a place to heal his wounds. Long Chen had faked coming ashore along several places on the river, so anyone searching for him would definitely have to waste a great deal of time on those diversions. That should be enough time for him to recuperate. But before that, he still had to find a safe place. Going through the forest, he saw a canyon before him. The canyon wasn't large, and it was bordered by stones on either side. Such a place should have a couple natural caves that were suitable for shelter. Just as he was about to forward, he suddenly felt a sense of danger as well as a burst of wind coming from behind. He hastily rolled forward. A huge creature came flying from behind him. Had he been slightly slower, he would have been hit. Long Chen rolled along the ground to dodge that attack. When he raised his head to look, he saw that it was a large leopard over 3 meters tall that was staring at him. Cliff leopard. Long Chen felt a huge headache. That was a first-rank magical beast. Its fur was the same color as the cliff rocks. When it was hiding itself amongst the rocks, it was extremely hard to notice. It wasn't exceptionally large, but its speed was shocking. Its claws and teeth were not inferior to steel. Having been injured so greatly, his spiritual perception had greatly fallen. He had actually not been able to sense the danger around him. It appeared he had been too dependent on his senses. That cliff leopard appeared somewhat startled that it hadn't taken him down with one blow. It charged at Long Chen again, its speed shocking. A normal leopard wasn't frightening, but the cliff leopard's body was just like a bull. Adding on its sharp claws and teeth, it was at the peak of the first-rank magical beast food chain. Long Chen coldly snorted. Rubbing his ring, his broadsword appeared back in his hands and he slashed it at the cliff leopard. The broadsword landed right on the cliff leopard's head, but Long Chen's arms shook and the broadsword actually got knocked out of his hands and he was sent flying. Damn, I don't even have a tenth of my normal strength. Long Chen was unable to use spiritual chi at the moment. Furthermore, his physical body was greatly injured and was unable to use even a tenth of its normal strength. His sword had slashed right onto the cliff leopard's head, yet the sword was knocked away and he was sent flying. Some of his wounds had even opened and blood started to flow. Although Long Chen was in an extremely weak state, his power was still quite great. That cliff leopard's head had been cut by the sword all the way down to the bone. If a regular wild beast received such a strong injury, they would definitely flee in pain. But magical beasts had an innate tyrannical nature deep in their bones. Long Chen's attack had instead provoked its violent nature, and it didn't even care about the blood flowing down its head as it angrily charged at Long Chen again. Long Chen rolled on the ground again, dodging its wild charge. At the same time, he also sent out a kick, heavily landing on its abdomen. That cliff leopard was sent tumbling through the air, but its skin and flesh was tough. Long Chen's kick hadn't caused any wounds. As soon as it stabilized itself, it once more charged at Long Chen. Long Chen was extremely anxious inside. If he had a sword, he would definitely be able to kill it. But that broadsword had been sent flying 30 meters away. Such a distance was essentially right beside him during ordinary times. But now he was in a tangle with the cliff leopard. Adding on the blood loss, his body was extremely weak. That 30 meters was simply untraversable for him. his body was exceptionally weak, and his reactions were not as sharp as normal. He once more dodged the cliff leopard, but its sharp claws managed to cut across his stomach lightly, causing more blood to flow. Long Chen once more kicked it, sending it flying. But after that kick, Long Chen's eyes darkened, and he was unable to see anything more. He sighed inside. His blood loss had been too great. He was actually on the verge of losing consciousness. Who would have thought that I, Long Chen, would die here at the hands of a wild animal? In that darkness, he could sense its bloody mouth. He was about to be swallowed into its stomach. Plop. He heard something, and then he felt his throat warm up, as if some liquid was being poured into his throat. He then heard some extremely distant sounds. Those sounds seemed human, one sounding like a woman. Then he sunk into complete and endless darkness. Within that darkness, Long Chen felt his body was floating. It felt like he was both rising and falling at the same time. He was completely trapped within that darkness. You must awaken. You have far too many missions that are awaiting for you to finish. You must become stronger. You have far too many enemies waiting for you to slaughter. Your destiny is to overturn heaven and earth. All gods and devils can only crawl under your foot. Long Chen quickly awakened. Within that endless darkness, Long Chen could hear a voice repeatedly speaking. That was a call that came from the deepest depths of his soul. Long Chen heard it and wanted to reply. However, he was unable to open his mouth. He wanted to open his eyes, but he was completely powerless. That voice didn't seem to be of this world. Could it be that it was part of the past or future? He was unable to touch it. Once Long Chen memorized those 3 lines, he completely lost any sense of himself. Sinking into complete unconsciousness, he extremely faintly felt a pair of hands gently rubbing his face, a gentleness that felt like that of a mother. The 4th prince's expression was exceedingly ugly. Looking at Ing Ho, who was lying on a bed, his body completely black, he couldn't believe his own eyes. A muscle rebirth expert had went out to kill a chi condensation and only to end up in such a state. Without personally seeing it, who would possibly such a thing? When he had first heard his subordinates report that Ing Ho had been heavily injured, he had first thought that Ing Ho had met some sort of powerful magical beast. But looking at Ing Ho's current half-dead state, a youthful face appeared in his mind. He didn't know why, but when he thought of that face, he immediately became panicked. The most important part of his plan had failed. Although he had never underestimated Long Chen, he had never expected he would be able to escape from Ing Ho, and even force Ing Ho into such a sorry state. I was overconfident. Ing Ho was ashamed. A grand muscle rebirth expert had almost lost his life in trying to kill someone at chi condensation. That was definitely a disgrace. The 4th prince shook his head. I know your character. You wouldn't carelessly be overconfident against someone and lose like this. It can only be said that we both underestimated Long Chen. I'm also at fault. It went without saying that the 4th prince was exceptionally talented at manipulating people. Otherwise he wouldn't have been able to win over apex experts like Ing Ho and Wu Ho. Just that one sentence from him completely excused Ing Ho's failure and let him feel extremely comfortable inside. That was how brilliant the 4th prince was. Since the matter had already occurred, getting angry would be completely useless. In fact, it would further anger Ing Ho. In any case, looking at Ing Ho's wounds, he had definitely not been too careless. He had only called himself overconfident to find an excuse for himself. Thinking of that, the 4th prince felt a burst of panic overcome him. Thinking of Long Chen's decisive and swift nature, his expression became increasingly ugly. But then thinking of the white-robed man that was his support, he relaxed a bit. Although Long Chen had run off, it didn't change his plans that much. He rubbed the photographic jade in his hand. Inside it was a complete recording of Long Chen and Amun killing Xia Changfeng. With this, he would still be able to go forward with his plan. Long Chen's escape was definitely worrisome, but he didn't have any way to handle him at this point. He turned to Ing Ho. You can recover at ease. I'll get Grandmaster Wei Tsong to personally come heal your wounds tomorrow. You'll be able to completely recover very quickly. Many thanks, Prince. Ingho Hazelty thanked him. That poison might be temporarily suppressed by him, but he was unable to dispel it. Long Chen's poison pill was just too terrifying. They had asked for help from the Alchemist Guild and Grandmaster Yun Qi had also come. But looking at Ingho's wounds, Grandmaster Yun Qi had only coldly stated that he was powerless to heal him. Ingho had immediately understood that Grandmaster Yun Qi had realized some clues from his body and so he had refused to save him. Hearing that Wei Tsong would come relieved Ingho down greatly. Wei Tsong would definitely be able to save him. The fourth prince went back to his room and began to pace around. After a while, he raised his brush and wrote a short missive, handing it to a guard. Looking at the darkness that was descending on the sky, the fourth prince sighed. Although Long Chen had escaped, they still had to continue with the plan. Chapter 84. You're my man. Long Chen slowly opened his eyes. He didn't know how much time had passed, but seeing the light caused him to sigh in relief. He was still alive. He realized he was lying on a simple bed. Although the bed was made from coarse wood, the bedsheets had been arranged very carefully for him and even had a faint fresh scent. He was in a wooden room. The walls had a couple animal hides, bows, arrows, and spears on them. Not far from his bed was a small stove that was releasing warmth. The smell of freshly cooked rice floated out of it. With a creaking sound, the door was opened. A maiden wearing a simple dress walked in. That woman appeared around 16 years old. She was slender and tall. Her arms and legs were both bare, and her skin gave off a healthy glow. She wore her hair in a medium-length ponytail. She wasn't overly beautiful, but her bright eyes gave off an extremely friendly feeling. That woman first put down her backsack before hastily opening the iron cooking pot atop the stove. That young lady let out a relieved sigh when she looked at the food inside. Close. I almost burnt it, she muttered to herself. But she suddenly sensed something was a bit off and slowly turned to see that Long Chen was looking at her in confusion. You've awoken. Great. She quickly happily ran over to Long Chen and hugged him excitedly. Miss, isn't this a bit unsuitable? Being hugged by a young lady, he could feel her chest against his as well as smell a fresh and energetic scent from her. But being hugged by a stranger truly did cause him to feel uncomfortable and awkward. What's unsuitable about it? I pulled you back here, so now you're my man. That's the rule of our village, so who would dare criticize? That maiden was still hugging onto Long Chen completely untimid, acting as if everything was as it should be. You pulled me back? Long Chen was startled. His last memory was of the cliff leopard. He hadn't seen this maiden before. Seeing his confusion, the maiden released him and said, That day when you fought with the magical beast, at the last moment I shot it with my arrow. Frankly speaking, your life was saved by me. In the future you'll be my man, and so your task in the future will be to go hunting and make babies with me. Looking at her serious expression, Long Chen's expression became extremely odd. Hunting? And making babies? When she saw that Long Chen was still as puzzled as ever, she began to explain what had happened that day. That woman was a huntress of the village. The village people all relied on hunting to survive. Other than some essential metal tools that they had to get from a distant place outside the mountains, they were completely self-sufficient here. There were over 100 people in the village. Most of them were all expert hunters. Even some of the children frequently went outside the village to set up a couple traps for smaller wild animals. There weren't any true experts in their village. The majority of them were only at qi condensation. According to the maiden, their ancestors had escaped to this place in order to avoid the flames of war. They gradually became accustomed to living here, and now hundreds of years had passed. The main food in the village was meat. They survived by relying on hunting and gathering. But their best targets were wild beasts. As for the larger magical beasts, they had to treat them extremely carefully. If they wanted to handle a powerful magical beast, they required the entire village to participate. This time they had noticed that there was a cliff leopard in the vicinities a while back. After a bit of investigation and after getting the approval of the village chief, they decided to kill this cliff leopard. Although killing magical beasts was extremely dangerous, the benefits were also accordingly great. The core of a first-rank magical beast was enough for the entire village to live off of for half a year if exchanged for goods. In order to handle this cliff leopard, they had prepared for over a month. They had refined enough poisons to apply on their weapons and also stealthily set up many traps. They were prepared to ambush it. But just as they were about to take action against it today, they watched dumbstruck as a youngster walked over to its territory. That woman had been hiding in secret along with many other hunters. She hadn't dared warn Long Chen. That would have alarmed the cliff leopard and ruined all the plans their village had spent over a month preparing. The result of failure was extremely severe. Many of their lives would be the price. That was why they had only watched stupefied as Long Chen was ambushed. Originally, they had all been feeling guilty about that. They could only hope that the cliff leopard would soon enter one of their traps so that they could take their revenge for Long Chen. But the scene that played after that caused all of them to be astonished. Long Chen's sword almost killed the incomparably vicious cliff leopard in one blow. They then realized that Long Chen had actually been wounded severely beforehand. The sword left his hands, but he was still able to fight without a weapon, exchanging several blows that sent the cliff leopard flying. At last they saw that Long Chen was unable to support himself anymore. She had been unable to bear it any further and shot out an arrow at the cliff leopard, killing it. But when she said that she had killed it with one arrow and saved Long Chen, she was actually somewhat embarrassed. Her archery skills weren't actually so great. In a moment of desperation, she had shot without even thinking that much. But in the end, her arrow, which had been aiming for the cliff leopard's mouth, actually went straight through its forehead. That was coincidentally the same place that Long Chen had hit it with his sword. His slash had already caused the cliff leopard's skull to crack, so her arrow had managed to coincidentally pierce through that crack, killing it. When everyone had rushed forward to check out her attack, they couldn't help taking a cold breath. If it weren't for that luck, then the villagers which had angered a magical beast would definitely lose many lives. An injured magical beast was the most frightening. They would become crazy because of their fear and do their best to attack. Many thanks. Only then did Long Chen finally learn what had happened. He respectfully cupped his hands at her. "You'll be my man in the future, so there's no need for that." She giggled and supported Long Chen at the shoulders. "Before, I would send prayers to the forest divinity every day in hopes of him bestowing me a powerful man who would go hunting and make babies with me. The forest divinity has finally heard my prayers and sent you to me." She was completely infatuated with him. Looking at his heroic and handsome appearance, she was extremely satisfied. "Cough, miss. Call me Xiao Huan." Miss Xiao Hua, as for the matter of a man, let's discuss that later. "Can you tell me just how my wounds were healed?" asked Long Chen. That was because he had noticed his miraculously recovered completely. But according to Xiao Hua, this was only the third day after encountering the cliff leopard. Without eating a single medicinal pill, not only had he miraculously healed in just a short 3 days, but even his body's cracked meridians had completely recovered. That greatly startled. "The forest divinity helped heal you," replied Xiao Hua. Forest divinity? Did this world really hold divinities? That's too many questions for right now. Let's eat first. Xiao Hua cut off Long Chen's questioning and brought the large pot from the stove outside. Long Chen didn't want to fake being injured, so he hastily went to help. He found that the large pot was filled with merely thin porridge. Only after carrying the pot outside the wooden house did Long Chen realize this was a village built against the side of a mountain. Thick fences made of thistles and thorns 10 meters high surrounded the village. Those thistles and thorns were a very poisonous plant. Most wild beasts would generally avoid them. Within the village were dozens of simple wooden houses. After Xiaohua's call, all of them walked over to her house. There were a dozen children and 5 or 6 seniors. But the majority were all youths or adults in their prime. Since they survived through hunting, it would be extremely dangerous if their physical strength lagged behind. A single person's carelessness could lead to a loss of life. That was why the majority of the people in the village were all in the prime of their lives. That was due to a natural elimination over time. Life was simply heartless. A healthy old man walked up to Long Chen and nodded. Excellent. A person capable of fighting against a magical beast on his own. Long Chen swept his senses out and found that the senior was a blood condensation expert. However, he was only at the early stage. If Long Chen's guess wasn't wrong, that old man should have only managed to enter blood condensation very late in his years. His blood chi had already started to decline. Despite stepping into blood condensation, his combat ability probably hadn't increased by much at all. Senior flatters me. Long Chen bowed slightly. I don't dare be called senior by you. Even in my prime, I was unable to compare to. That old man was filled with admiration for Long Chen. Grandpa, hurry up and eat. Xiaohua had already split up the porridge for everyone. She brought 2 bowls for Long Chen and the old man. Let me introduce you too. This is my grandpa, the village chief. Oh right, I still don't know your name, suddenly asked Xiaohua. Thanks. My name is Long Chen. Long Chen laughingly received his bowl of porridge. Everyone from the village, young and old, male or female, now came over to welcome Long Chen. He had to hastily put down his bowl to greet them all. They had saved his life. That favor had to be remembered. These people were all very simple and sincere people. Their etiquettes were a bit strange to him, but the friendly warmth in their eyes already said everything to him. There were over 100 people in the village. There were only 30 females in the village, and Xiaohua was the only young maiden amongst them. The rest were all still babies. Big brother, I heard you're really strong. Did you really send a giant leopard flying with a single punch? A small child that didn't even reach his knee hugged Long Chen's leg. He looked at Long Chen with worship. Of course it's true. My dad told me Big Brother is a true warrior. Once he's with Big Sis Hua, their babies will be the strongest fighters in our village. Long Chen didn't even know how to respond before another child scrambled over. That child then looked at Long Chen eagerly. Big brother, when are you going to let our village's strongest fighters be born? Long Chen's expression stiffened and the surrounding people all laughed heartily. Even Xiaohua laughed, making Long Chen feel more embarrassment. He quickly changed the topic. Didn't you guys kill the magical beast? Why aren't you eating its meat? As soon as he said, the joyous atmosphere immediately became strange. They were all looking at their village chief. He was just about to say anything when Xiaohua interjected, I should be the one to tell you about this. Chapter 85 Forest Divinity. I should be the one to tell you about this. Xiaohua looked at Long Chen and then glanced at her grandpa. Xiaohua, the old man frowned. Grandpa, Long Chen is my man. He will also be one of our villagers' people in the future. He has the right to know about this. The old man argued no more. The others all quickly drank their thin porridge and returned to their homes, leaving only the 3 of them. That magical beast was offered as a sacrifice, explained Xiaohua to Long Chen. Offered as a sacrifice? That was the first time Long Chen had heard of such a thing. Your wounds were too severe and you were on the verge of death. We had no other method but to send you to the forest divinity. The forest divinity healed you, but the price was that we had to offer the magical beast as a sacrifice. That's also why you were able to completely recover in just a short 3 days. Did this world really hold divinities? That completely toppled his understanding. Not only that, but because your injuries were so severe, our village also had to offer all the meat we had stored away. And even so, we still owed the forest divinity more. We'll have to pay back our debts slowly through hunting. Only then did Long Chen understand why the entire village only had some thin porridge to eat. The young men definitely required meat in order to get stronger. But for him, they could only go hungry. He couldn't help feeling bad about this. Long Chen, I'm explaining this to you not so that you feel guilty. But you're also a member of the village now, so I thought you had the right to know this. Xiaohua quietly explained this all. But that only made him feel even more ashamed. This kind of trust made him feel incomparably warm, especially since he was used to the cruel schemes inside the royal capital. Can you tell me about this forest divinity? Xiaohua looked at her grandpa, and only after he nodded did she tell him a true story that was practically mythic. Not long after this village had been first built, one of their ancestors found an extremely mystical tree. That ancestor was once wounded by a magical beast and almost died. He had managed to flee to in front of that large tree. The tree dripped a drop of liquid onto him, and their ancestor's heavy wounds completely healed in just half a day. In order to thank the large tree, they hunted a wild beast and placed it as a sacrifice in front of the large tree. Then they saw that that huge tree actually swallowed away that dead beast in the blink of an eye. Ever since then, whenever someone was injured, the villagers would all run over to the tree to be treated, and every time the tree would completely restore them. In order to display their reverence and respect for tree, they had begun to call it the forest divinity. Not long after they began to offer sacrifices to the tree, it actually began to communicate with them and established an agreement with them. It could heal the villagers' wounds, but they would need to offer sacrifice to it in reciprocation. As for the amount of the sacrifice, it would depend on how heavy the wounds were. This was just like a doctor asking for payment. But in all these years, the forest divinity had never asked for that much as a reward. They hadn't ever needed to offer it that much. But now, Long Chen was an exception. The forest divinity had demanded a shocking price to save Long Chen. What did it want? Asked Long Chen. Xiaohua looked at Long Chen and ground her teeth. 10 first-rank magical beast and 1 second-rank magical beast. Long Chen was shocked. A single first-rank magical beast already required Xiaohua's entire village to prepare for a long time and still posed an extremely great danger. As for a second-rank magical beast, that would require several blood condensation experts to join hands in order to kill. To the villagers, that was something completely impossible. That so-called forest divinity's price was far too great. Looking at Long Chen's indignant expression, Xiaohua hastily said, "Long Chen, you definitely can't feel any resentment towards the forest divinity. The forest divinity has always been extremely fair over all these years. No matter how heavily injured we were, it never required such a high price. There's definitely a reason for it to demand for so much this time. Plus, now you're healed. You can help us, and I trust that we'll be able to quickly repay our debt. Even if it was 10 second-rank magical beasts, we still would have accepted. We couldn't just silently watch you die." At the end, Xiaohua began to sob. She fell into Long Chen's chest. Her grandpa sighed. "Long Chen, the forest divinity is absolutely fair. For it requires such a price, there is definitely a reason. Don't get angry. I want to go see the forest divinity." Long Chen wanted to figure out just what this forest divinity was. As for the price that it had demanded, Long Chen wasn't worried at all. Now that he had recovered, first-rank magical beasts could be killed in an instant. As for a second-rank magical beast, as long as he wasn't careless, that was also something he could bring down. A second-rank magical beast was equivalent to a human blood condensation expert. However, due to how tough a magical beast's physical body was, humans on equivalent levels were not a match for magical beasts. But who was Long Chen? Below the muscle rebirth realm, he had no fear for the blood condensation realm. He didn't like to have to owe anything. If he confirmed that this forest divinity wasn't some fake swindler, he wanted to pay it back as fast as possible. He also wondered to know just what this divinity was. Xiaohua's grandpa acquiesced, and so Long Chen followed Xiaohua out of the village on a mountain path. Xiaohua was clearly very familiar with this area. With a bow and quiver on her back, she would occasionally pause to listen to the surroundings. She would also occasionally go bring Long Chen to check some of the surroundings' traps and snares they had set up to see if they had captured some wild beasts. But there was only disappointment. They checked a dozen snares, but none of them had caught anything. "It's so sad that we have no meat. We need meat in order to strengthen our bodies. It'll get very difficult to hunt without any more," sighed Xiaohua. They were hunters, and meat was something that strengthened them. Having gone without any meat for several days, the villagers' morale had been greatly impacted. "Don't worry about it. I'll handle that debt. Since it was because of me, just let me resolve me myself, laughed Long Chen. Xiao Hua's expression changed and she angrily retorted, what are you talking about? Your matters are my matters, which are also the village's matters. How could we let you go face danger alone? Long Chen smiled and shut his mouth. But he truly did like this village's ambience. There was no selfishness, only a peaceful coexistence. Just how luxurious would such an ambience be in the world of the imperial capital where fights and schemes arose every day? This was a beautiful place, but Long Chen couldn't possibly stay, let alone muddle along to make kids. His life was saved by the villagers. He had to repay this debt before leaving. Wait a moment. Suddenly Xiao Hua stopped. Looking at the footprints on the ground, her expression was completely serious. A bear has just recently gone past here. Based on the depth and size of the footprint, it should be a matured burst bear. It's definitely longer than 3 meters. It should have passed through just 2 hours ago based on the color of the soil. Xiao Hua was definitely worthy of being a highly experienced huntress. She was able to tell so much from just a footprint. The burst bear was a first-rank magical beast that was exceptionally berserk, making it extremely hard to deal with. Even if the whole village joined hands, they still wouldn't dare to handle this burst bear. They had the ability to attack the cliff leopard because its speciality was its speed, however its attacking and defensive strengths were not particularly great. As long as they paid attention to its movements and they had enough people, they definitely had a good chance of killing it. But the burst bear was not the same. It specialized in defensive strength and power. No matter how many people they had, it would all be useless. It looks like we should make a detour, determined Xiao Hua. Why? Long Chen didn't understand. Fool, do you really have to ask? We aren't a match for the burst bear. Even if all the fighters in the village collected, we still wouldn't have a high chance of beating it. Who says? Who? You really are trying to piss me off. Looking at Long Chen's foolish wooden manner, Xiao Hua was both angered and anxious. But suddenly she thought of something and blinked. You aren't thinking of going to kill the burst bear, are you? Of course. She was silent for a moment. She immediately thought of when Long Chen had fought with the cliff leopard. At that time, Long Chen had been an absolute, unstoppable god in her eyes. And according to her grandpa, Long Chen should have already received extremely heavy injuries before meeting the cliff leopard, otherwise it was very likely that he would have been able to kill it on his own. Now looking at Long Chen's current expression, she finally realized that Long Chen might really possess the strength to kill a first-rank magical beast. Have you killed a first-rank magical beast before? Probed Xiao Hua. Nope. Long Chen shook his head. This was the first time he had gone away from home, and although he had eaten magical beast meat several times, those had been defeated by Amon. But Long Chen muttered inside, although I haven't killed a magical beast, but I've slaughtered quite a few blood condensation experts. Xiao Hua shook her head. Then let's just let it go. Killing a magical beast isn't just done by relying on a high cultivation base or who is stronger. You have to rely on waiting for a good opportunity. Skill and experience are extremely important. Since you haven't killed a magical beast before, we should try to avoid such a risky scenario. Hunters never take such risks, otherwise it would be the hunter who is turned into the prey. You don't take risks? Then what do you call what you did to save me? Laughed Long Chen. You're not allowed to ever bring that up. Her face reddened and she threateningly raised her fist. Okay. I won't joke with you anymore. Don't worry, I won't risk our lives on a gamble, firmly said Long Chen. Long Chen no longer had any of his joking, mischievous air. Now he was completely serious and gave off a feeling of great confidence and security. She didn't know why, but seeing him like that immediately caused her to calm down and relax. Even her terrifying impression of the burst bear became lighter. With Xiao Hua guiding the both of them with her hunting experience, the two of them followed the tracks for 2 hours and found a large natural cave. Within that cave, the originally sleeping burst bear suddenly opened its eyes, staring at the two people who had invaded his territory. Roar! The burst bear suddenly jumped up. Its huge 3-meter-tall figure violently charged towards the two of them. Looking at the wildly charging burst bear, Xiaohua turned pale with fright. That was the first time she had ever revealed herself so exposed to a magical beast. That went against everything she knew as a huntress. But Xiaohua noticed that Long Qin remained as calm as ever. His gaze was indifferent as he punched out with his right hand. Chapter 86 Killing with the Wave of a Hand. In front of Xiaohua's horrified eyes, the enormous burst bear charged at Long Qin, swatting at him with a huge bear claw. The burst bear's strongest point was its powerful claws. It could easily crush rock, so a human body would immediately turn to pulp. That was also why the villagers had never dared place any intentions on the burst bear. Their combined forces were unable to severely injure the burst bear, while the burst bear would be able to kill several of them with a single charge. Bang! Xiaohua covered her mouth, unable to believe her own eyes. That burst bear's terrifying attack was actually stiffly blocked by Long Qin. Waves of qi scattered and the land shook, but Long Qin didn't take even a single step back. Although his figure wasn't imposing, he was able to easily block the huge burst bear, which was several times his size. The current Long Qin's hair was dancing in the wind, and he appeared like a revered god of war. After blocking that burst bear with a single fist, Long Qin coldly smiled. If it was below muscle rebirth, then even the burst bear which specialized in violence was still insufficient to even enter his gaze. Long Qin made a couple calculations. The burst bear's attack had a force of over 5 tons. An ordinary qi condensation expert would be crushed to death in a single blow. And even blood condensation experts would have to reach the middle stage first before just barely being able to block that attack. That was just how terrifying a magical beast which specialized in power was. But in front of Long Qin, that attack posed no danger at all. At the same time, Long Qin thought of Aman. If Aman was here, he would probably also block it and then wring its neck. Long Qin didn't waste any more time. Taking advantage of the burst bear stumbling in shock, a broadsword appeared in his hands and he slashed down. Blood splattered as Long Qin broadsword slashed right through the burst bear's head. It didn't even have time to make a single sound as it tumbled to the ground. Xiaohua blankly watched it all. She felt as if she was dreaming. It wasn't that she hadn't killed a magical beast before, but it was the first time she had seen such an overbearing method. Normally when the villagers killed magical beasts, they had to make ample preparations. They had to set snares and traps and coat all their weapons with poison. To handle a single magical beast would require close to a month's preparations. And despite all those preparations, despite gathering the entire village's power, killing that magical beast had to be done extremely carefully. A single mistake could cost many lives. Yet in front of Long Qin, that incomparably frightening burst bear had been taken down effortlessly. How do we handle this thing? Only when Long Qin asked her a question did Xiaohua awake from her stupor. Looking at that huge burst bear's corpse, she said, "How about we return to the village and bring this magical beast up in front of the forest divinity? Or how about you keep it to eat, and only once you get some more prey do you offer more sacrifices?" proposed Long Qin. The villagers were surviving only barely on porridge. That was no way to live or even survive in this wilderness. In any case, killing this kind of magical beast didn't require any real effort from him. We can't disappoint the forest divinity's trust in us. That's blasphemous. Fine. Long Qin was helpless. Waving his hand, he collected the burst bear's massive corpse into his spatial ring. How did you do that? Are you a god? Xiaohua looked at Long Qin in astonishment. That giant corpse had disappeared into thin air, and at the same time, she thought of how Long Qin had suddenly summoned a broadsword into his hands at the beginning. When they had brought Long Qin back to the village back then, they had also brought along that broadsword. But it was so heavy that it had required 2 people to carry. Later they kept it permanently by Long Qin's bed. Once he had awoken, Long Qin naturally had collected it. Thinking of that, Xiaohua was completely bewildered. Long Qin couldn't help laughing. How am I a god? This is a spatial ring and can easily store objects. Long Chen rubbed his ring and the burst bear's corpse once more appeared. Xiaohua enviously looked at Long Chen's ring, continuously praising it. Obviously Xiaohua had never heard of things like spatial rings. Most likely due to how low quality their beast hides and crystal cores were, they were unable to make much money. They were completely unable to come into contact with expensive items like spatial rings. Xiaohua, let me give you a present. Long Chen took out another ring. That ring had been his only harvest from killing Xia Changfeng. Long Chen had looked over what was inside while being chased by Yinghe. Other than some money and weapons, the rest was all useless to him. But there had been one good thing inside. There was the manual that Xia Changfeng had won from the auction, 3-style parting wind. Within the surrounding empires, Earth-class battle skills were already the highest rank of battle skills available. For Xia Changfeng to be able to obtain such a battle skill for just 500 million gold coins was actually quite lucky. But now that luck wasn't his but Long Chen's. Other than taking out the 3-hit wind, he left everything else inside the ring. No, Long Chen, I can't accept your things. Seeing Long Chen suddenly hand her a ring, she hastily jumped and refused. Why not? Didn't you say I was your man? You don't want what your man gives you? Long Chen couldn't help joking. Although he was kidding around a bit, he definitely did have a favorable opinion of how kind and lively Xiaohua was. Although it wasn't that kind of romantic feeling, he definitely did want to be friends. Xiaohua was obviously a young woman longing for love. She glanced at the ring in his hands with a contradicting expression. She was definitely extremely curious towards this practically divine ring, but she didn't feel comfortable taking it. Just take it. Treat it as my gift. Long Chen placed the ring into her hand. Xiaohua's hand was extremely beautiful, however it had a layer of calluses, another mark of her being a huntress and often drawing a bow. She lowered her completely red head and rubbed the ring in her hand over and over. That was the first time Long Chen had seen Xiaohua actually show her shy side. Here, I'll teach you how to use it. Gather your focus to the spot between your eyebrows and from that spot, focus your mind on within the ring. At the same time, inject a bit of spiritual qi with your other hand. Ordinary people weren't able to open spatial rings, but cultivators could as long as they had reached the qi condensation realm. As long as they could use their qi and combine it with spiritual strength, they would be able to open it. But Xiaohua didn't understand the slightest thing about spiritual strength. She needed Long Chen to guide her step by step. What completely surprised Long Chen was that Xiaohua was extremely smart and quickly comprehended the method in just a few tries. This made him shake his head inside. If Aman had just half Xiaohua's smart, he wouldn't have to worry so much about him. Thinking of Aman, Long Chen couldn't help becoming anxious. He didn't know if Aman had brought little Snow back to the capital. But according to Long Chen's calculations, having held up Yinghe, there was no one who would recognize Aman. It was highly likely he would be able to return to the capital. As long as he did and then went to ask Grandmaster Yunqi for help, that would shield the Long household from worries. But plans could never be completely perfect. He also had to quickly return to the capital. Of course, before that, he still had to complete 2 things. One of which was to repay the village's debt, otherwise with their guileless natures, if they really did go try killing a second-rank magical beast, who knew how many of them would die. And secondly, he had to increase his cultivation base. His fight with Yinghe had made him realize he was still lacking. In front of a muscle rebirth expert, he was powerless to resist. Such a feeling was definitely not one he wanted to feel a second time. How much stuff. Xiaohua finally managed to open the spatial ring and saw what was inside. Inside was a space several meters wide. There was a mountain of golden coins along with many weapons that shined coldly. It was obviously the first time she had seen such fine weapons. And as for the gold coins, she didn't have any shock because she didn't even recognize what they were. They would only ever send anyone out of the village once every now and then. That journey required half a month to reach a distant town. They would exchange crystal cores and hides for the metal instruments, food and other provisions they needed. They never actually touched money. As for the coldly shining weapons, only they were truly interesting to Xiaohua, who was a huntress. Looking at those weapons, she almost fainted from joy. Spiritual qi is required to open the ring. If you want to take things out or put things in, then you need to use your spiritual strength. Try it. Long Chen laughed at her excitement. Okay. Xiaohua tried using her spiritual strength several times without succeeding. One reason was because her spiritual strength was too weak. Not all people had such vigorous spiritual strength like alchemists. And for another, Xiaohua was a complete amateur at using spiritual strength. Trying to use it was an exceptionally laborious task that had long since been expected by Long Chen, and he didn't rush her. He continuously encouraged her. If she could use the spatial ring properly, then the weapons inside would allow the entire village's strength to rise to another level. It would definitely reduce the casualties of the hunters. Plus, they would have it much more convenient whenever they had to go out of the village. In the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Xiaohua finally managed to use her spiritual strength from the spatial ring. But due to her lack of control, she was unable to control where it appeared and it fell to the ground. Wow. Excellent, I can use this divine ring. Xiaohua picked up the sword with one hand and hugged Long Chen with the other excitedly. Hey, be careful. You almost ran me through with your sword. Long Chen laughed bitterly. She was unable to control her excitement, and she chopped the new sword in her hand at a tree around the width of an arm. With a clean sound, the sword effortlessly chopped through the tree. Its sharpness caused Xiaohua to exclaim in excitement. Obviously, the weapons they could exchange for in the town they went to were unable to compare to such a fine weapon. Seeing that she had learned the initial ways to use it, Long Chen helped her to take out a spear. To hunters, spears were definitely more useful than swords. The two of them continued traveling forward when they suddenly ran into a wild boar. It looked to be over a ton. Perhaps the two of them had walked into its territory since it was now attacking them. Xiaohua stabbed at it with her spear. The sharpness of the spear made it seem like she was chopping tofu. It punctured right through the boar's tough hide, pierced its heart, and came out through the other side of its body. Xiaohua was incomparably excited. She had been able to bring down a matured wild boar in just a single blow. That was an incredibly great accomplishment to her. The of them hurried along their journey. On the midday of the next day, the two of them finally arrived beside a certain pond with an enormous tree beside it. Chapter 87 Spirit World. The enormous tree reached high into the sky. Its treetop spanned several miles. It practically covered the entire mountaintop. In front of the huge tree whose trunk was hundreds of meters wide, was a small pond whose water was incredibly clear. There was also a stone platform that had been created by man. It was obviously a sacrificial altar constructed by the village's ancestors. When he looked at that immense tree, Long Chen sensed an incredibly strong vitality as well as a majestic and boundless natural energy. It seemed as if this huge tree contained the entire natural will of the world. It was extremely stunning. "This is your forest divinity?" asked Long Chen. "Yes, this is our forest divinity. You should pay your respects with me. It is the one who really saved your life." After saying that, Xiaohua reverently kneeled down and kowtowed. Long Chen looked at this huge tree. It was this tree which had saved him. Seeing that no one had given him any medicinal pills after he had fainted, he would have burnt up all his energy and eventually have died. To pay respects to the one who had saved him was acceptable. Just as Long Chen was about to get on his knees, a soft voice rang over, a voice that made them feel like they were being cleansed by spring wind. "Please don't be like this. I'm unable to accept such a thing." Suddenly a figure appeared atop the sacrificial altar. It was a female figure in a white dress. Her black hair fell to her waist, giving people a fluttering, immortal feeling. However, her figure was extremely fuzzy and her features couldn't be seen clearly. Forest divinity. Xiaohua, who was kneeling on the ground, looked up in shock. She had once heard the forest divinity's voice before, but she had never seen it take form. Not only her, even in all the village's history, there was not a single person who had ever seen the forest divinity take form. But as soon as Long Chen had arrived and before he even knelt, it immediately appeared before him. And furthermore, it even implied it was not worthy of Long Chen's reverence. Xiaohua became dizzy. Even a divinity was unworthy of Long Chen's worship. Long Chen was filled with astonishment as he looked at that figure. He knew that this figure wasn't human, but a soul. That was something that could only form when one's spiritual strength reached a kind of pinnacle. Long Chen was extremely proud of his powerful spirit, but in front of the forest divinity, he was just like a small stream in front of a huge ocean. This was the first time he had ever felt himself to be so minute. "You are the forest divinity?" probingly asked Long Chen. That woman smiled slightly and didn't reply. Looking at the kneeling Xiaohua, she gently said, "Sleep for a while." Xiaohua immediately rolled over to the ground, falling into a deep slumber. Long Chen was startled. What a powerful technique. Even without using spiritual energy, just her will was able to make people fall asleep. Only then did she turn to Long Chen. "The words we speak between us aren't suitable for her to hear, so I could only let her sleep for a while. I am no divinity. That was simply what they called me. The truth is that I am not from this world." "Not from this world?" Long Chen was greatly startled. "I come from the distant spirit world. To the current you, that is still extremely far. But I know that with your talent, it won't be long before you reach it," said that woman. Her words caused Long Chen's heart to wildly pound. He knew this forest divinity was definitely a frightening existence, but she actually refused to explain just what this spirit world was. Spirit world. That was a term that Long Chen was completely unfamiliar with. But when he heard it, he had a kind of déjà vu feeling. That was an extremely vague and profound feeling. Seeing that she didn't continue explaining, Long Chen didn't interrogate her. He cupped his fists. "Long Chen will engrave the favor of saving my life into my memory. Actually, you don't need to thank me. You should thank those villagers. According to our agreement, no matter what they needed, I would need to meet their demands. At the same time, I also have to put out an equivalent price. This was our agreement, so you don't need to thank me." She shook her head. "I wonder whether I can ask why you would make an agreement with ordinary people?" asked Long Chen. This was a question Long Chen had wondered for a long time. This was like a huge elephant making an agreement with a group of ants. It didn't make sense. She was silent for a while before replying, "Because I need their help." Their help? Long Chen didn't understand. A terrifyingly powerful existence like this actually required the help of ordinary villagers. "I said that I am not of this world. Due to an intense battle, a crack appeared in time and space, sweeping me away. Originally I should have died. Although I just managed to survive by luck, my body suffered extremely heavy wounds. After a long time of recovery, my body gradually healed. But if I want to return to my world, I need to sacrifice a great deal of blood. I need to accumulate enough fleshly power in order to open a space-time channel and return to my original world. You must be curious as to why I don't personally hunt myself and rely on their hands," she said. Long Chen nodded. That was the most obvious inconsistency. It seemed needless for her to rely on the villagers. "That's because my spirit clan has its own restrictions. We can't go kill others for our own needs. We can't personally end lives." "Why is that?" "This has to do with the secret cultivation technique of my spirit clan. If I personally kill anything, absorbing its flesh will cause me to also absorb its hatred at being killed. That is a kind of unresolvable poison to us," she explained. Although Long Chen felt a bit out of his depths when talking to this white-dressed woman, he understood a bit of why she would make such an agreement with Xiaohua's ancestors. "You are someone with limitless potential. This time your meridians were extremely injured. I not only healed them, I also expanded them a bit. I also used my core energy to increase your meridian's toughness. So your medical expenses were a bit higher." Long Chen was surprised. After awakening, he had sensed his body seemed to have changed a bit, but he hadn't figured out just what change was. Now with her reminder, he quickly examined his meridians and went wild with joy. His meridians had actually become over twice as wide as they had been before. And most importantly, his meridians, which before were like glass tubes, had changed to become like flexible skin. Such meridians could endure a much greater amount of spiritual energy without bursting. That was a huge surprise. If the current him fought with Ho again, his meridians would definitely not crack again. At that time, he would definitely be able to kill him. Many thanks. Long Chen was completely sincere. Thinking back to how angry he had been when he had first heard of this sacrificial offer, he couldn't help feeling ashamed of himself. She shook her head. As someone from the Spirit Clan, I was only following the agreement. So you don't need to thank me. Long Chen laughed. I want to ask, if I were to slip away after you cured me, what would you do? That white-robed female figure seemed to laugh and shook her head. You wouldn't. Members of my Spirit Clan are extremely sensitive when it comes to other people's hearts. If you were a wicked person, I would be able to sense immediately and absolutely wouldn't save you. And even if you left, there would be others to pay back the debt. But in that case, I would forgive that debt and the previous agreement would be void. Then wouldn't you suffer a lose? Smiled Long Chen. It can be considered so. But it would be of no matter. This is the rule of my Spirit Clan. The agreement must be followed according to that initial premise. Like with the village's ancestors? Long Chen suddenly thought of the story Xiao Hua had told him. Yes, that is our customs. Such a custom was definitely a good one, but within the world of the imperial capital, such a thing would guarantee you would suffer great losses. Long Chen sighed inside. This was an agreement based on good faith, an agreement based on the heart. It was definitely much more effective than any signed contract. The most assured agreement was one that was on the spiritual level. Long Chen unconsciously began to feel a profound respect for this woman from the so-called spirit world. She was a pure and innocent soul that had yet to be contaminated by the mortal world. Right? How much more magical beast flesh do you still require here? Long Chen took out the burst bear's corpse and threw it onto the ground. Suddenly countless roots tore out of the ground and dug their way into the burst bear's corpse. In less than a breath's time, the corpse was sucked dry. Even its bones were sucked away, leaving behind only a couple pieces of skin. After that burst bear was sucked dry, Long Chen was startled to sense that the huge tree's vitality grew even stronger, and its leaves seemed to have become much more spiritual. In order to heal you, I injured my core. I need 10 first-rank magical beasts and 1 second-rank magical beast before being able to heal, the white-robed woman replied. Then wouldn't you have made no profit? Long Chen was a bit flabbergasted. She lightly replied, it's still the same as what I said before. That was the agreement set up at the beginning. I understood. But I, Long Chen, am not someone who likes owing others. Having received such a great favor from you, I will definitely remember it, nodded Long Chen. He didn't want to owe others favors. But if someone did help him, he would repay that favor back 10 times. Just like how Fatty Yu and the others had only helped him out at the beginning by lending him a bit of money, but Long Chen forever remembered that favor. His meridians had been broadened now, and whether it was to his future cultivation or his use of battle skills, it was an enormous benefit. Such a favor was so enormous that it couldn't even be imagined. After talking to the forest divinity, Long Chen gently woke up Xiao Hua. They left the area of the forest divinity and returned to the village. After arriving, Xiao Hua excitedly gathered everyone and showed them the wild boar she had killed, as well as telling them about how Long Chen had easily killed a burst bear and how the forest divinity had taken form in front of them. Everyone stared at her with wide eyes. The most shocking thing was that the forest divinity had taken shape in front of them. After hearing that, all the villagers knelt down towards the distant direction of the forest divinity. Because of the agreement with Long Chen and the forest divinity had excused their debt for now. That very night, everyone celebrated with a large serving of wild boar meat. Xiao Hua then showed everyone her new spatial ring. She took out the weapons within it one by one, causing everyone in the village to become incomparably excited. After eating, Long Chen disappeared into the night alone. There was one thing that he absolutely had to do. Chapter 88 Heavenly Punishment. Covered by the darkness of night, Long Chen climbed to the peak of a mountain. The bright moon hung high above, lighting up his surroundings so that he could see the scenery hundreds of miles around. At this time, Long Chen no longer had to be as worried as he had been while being chased by Yingho. This was an exceptionally good spot for him to cultivate. Within this primal, thick forest, the spiritual qi in the air was several times greater than in the capital. He needed to borrow that advantage to advance another level. Ever since he had run into Yingho when killing Xia Changfeng, he had repeatedly fought on the brink of death. Long Chen's resolution had actually greatly advanced from that. He could feel that a certain bottleneck was starting to weaken. This was his best opportunity to attack the next realm. The peak of the mountaintop could only be reached by climbing up extremely steep cliffs, so he had no need to fear any beasts disturbing him. Sitting cross-legged atop a boulder, his 12 cyclones began to revolve. Space trembled and 12 huge vortexes appeared behind his body, growing to a terrifying size of 330 meters. This was the first time Long Chen had fully summoned his cyclones outside his body since arriving past the 10th heaven stage. That was because he was afraid that oddity would alarm his opponents. It was unheard of for someone to possess 10 or more cyclones from qi condensation. But in this place, he finally had free rein to use his full power to absorb heaven and earth's spiritual qi. Those 12 huge cyclones were like 12 mouths, like whales drinking in water, greedily absorbing spiritual qi and sending it to Long Chen's Feng Fu star. That scene could practically be seen with the visible eye. Space started to warp as all the spiritual qi within hundreds of miles began to gather towards Long Chen. Boom! In just 6 hours, Long Chen's Feng Fu star emitted an explosive sound. That was because his spiritual qi had reached a critical boundary, a sign he was about to enter the next realm. But Long Chen wasn't the slightest bit excited because he knew that this was just the start. There was still a long process he had to work his hardest to get through. Back when he had condensed his 10th cyclone, he had experienced the trouble of being close to advancing. He was already used to how unorthodox the 9-star Hegemon body art was. For most martial artists, advancing would only require breaking past a single barrier, which was often thought of as breaking out of a single pair of shackles. Extremely talented people might have to break through multiple shackles. But no matter how talented someone was, to break through out of qi condensation would definitely never require breaking out of more than 9 shackles. But when Long Chen had broken through to the 10th heaven stage, although he hadn't been counting, he was sure he had long since surpassed 1,000 shackles. The next 2 times he had broken through, Long Chen hadn't even bothered remembering how many barriers he had had to break through of. In any case, it was just a continuous charge by him until he finally broke through. So when his Feng Fu star emitted this first sound, Long Chen wasn't at all excited. He simply continued absorbing energy. More and more energy began to pour into his Feng Fu star. It began to quickly circulate, at the same time emitting continuous explosions. Long Chen didn't bother with that. He simply did his best to absorb more and more energy. Clouds and winds gathered around him. The energy all around charged towards him. Hundreds of miles away from Long Chen was an enormous tree. At the top of the tree was a white-robed woman watching him. What a powerful foundational aura. It looks like humanity will gain another astounding figure. After muttering that, her figure faded away. Long Chen's Feng Fu star was incessantly trembling. This wasn't out of Long Chen's expectations. From the start, he was unable to advance to the next realm. This continued for 3 full days. Long Chen's Feng Fu star was beginning to circulate slower, and in the end, it completely paused. Long Chen couldn't help celebrating. This was the true sign he was about to make a breakthrough. Boom! Suddenly, heaven and earth trembled. The 12 cyclones behind Long Chen slowly separated, revealing a 13th cyclone amongst them. When this 13th cyclone appeared, The originally sunny and cloudless sky immediately turned dark with pitch-black clouds. Thunder rumbled and lightning flashed. Everything within thousands of miles went completely dark. What's going on? Long Chen was completely horrified. He realized that all those black clouds were like a huge whirlpool, and the whirlpool's center was facing right at himself. It looked nothing more than a huge demonic eye. It expressionlessly focused on Long Chen. At the same time, a terrifying destructive will pushed down upon him. Long Chen immediately realized he was unable to move an inch. He was unable to even bat his eyes. He wildly cursed inside as he saw more and more black clouds gather in the sky. The lightning within the sky gradually converged at the center of the black clouds. Is it going to strike me? Even if Long Chen was stupid, he would still be able to predict what was about to happen. He madly struggled. But it was as if his whole body was being pressed by a huge mountain. Despite his best efforts, his body merely continuously trembled. The huge boulder beneath his foot cracked. Such a sturdy boulder was actually unable to bear Long Chen's weight. Even if Long Chen's was braver, he wouldn't be able to help trembling in fear. He tried running, but he felt as if a whole mountain was crushing him from every direction. He was only able to make very limited movements and was simply unable to flee. This is heavenly punishment. You are unable to flee. Gather your full strength to resist. As Long Chen was wildly cursing inside and was incredibly anxious, a voice suddenly rang in Long Chen's ears. Forest divinity? Long Chen immediately recognized that voice. But heavenly punishment? He was infuriated. How many evil people existed in the world, and yet the heavens decided to punish him? Hearing that voice, it seemed the forest divinity knew the origin of this terrifying heavenly punishment. Since she had given him a warning, she definitely wasn't trying to hurt him. Putting away his anger, he rubbed his ring and his broadsword appeared in his hands. He pushed his power to its peak. The 13 cyclones revolved around Long Chen. A halo of light enveloped Long Chen. It was as if a god from the heavens had reincarnated within him and was disdainfully looking up at the sky. The white-robed woman saw the 13 cyclones and the halo of light from the distance. She was deep in thought. Long Chen pushed his 13 cyclones to the max. Energy from heaven and earth was continuously streaming into his body. Now that his meridians had been transformed by the white-robed woman, he was able to control an even greater amount of energy. The black clouds in the sky were becoming increasingly thick, and the lightning was become more and more concentrated. Suddenly, the sky became completely silent. A bolt of lightning several feet wide shot straight down from the center of the black clouds towards Long Chen, its power seeming to want to destroy the heavens and exterminate the earth. Long Chen watched as that terrifying lightning bolt descended. He felt an endless destructive will coming from it. Raising his broadsword with both hands, a strange light appeared over his sword. Split the heavens. Boom! The mountain peak, which was hundreds of meters tall, was destroyed. Rocks crumbled as that one lightning bolt completely flattened the mountain. Long Chen vomited 3 consecutive mouthfuls of blood. His body was charred all over and he could even smell his own flesh cooking. His full-force blow was like an ant waving its antenna in front of an elephant. He was unable to shake that lightning bolt in the slightest. He was essentially powerless. This made him feel completely dispirited. In front of that lightning, he felt that he was completely insignificant. His joy from advancing to the 13th heaven stage was immediately extinguished. You did very well. The sky once more returned to its sunny state as the black clouds scattered. It was as if everything before had been just an illusion. A white-robed woman appeared in front of Long Chen. Long Chen was about to say something when he once more vomited more blood. That thunderbolt had greatly shaken his internal organs. The white-robed woman waved her hand and a drop of green liquid came from her body and fell into Long Chen's mouth. Long Chen only managed to sense that it tasted sweet before it quickly slid down his throat and rapidly spread throughout his body. His wounds began to quickly heal. The black burnt parts of his skin slowly fell off. In less than an incense stick's worth of time, his body had recovered 80 to 90%. This was much more miraculous than any healing medicinal pills. No need to be surprised. The first heavenly punishment is mostly focused on destroying willpower. If your willpower wasn't sturdy enough, your mind and soul would have been exterminated by the heavenly punishment, said the white-robed woman. What is this heavenly punishment? Asked Long Chen. It is the will of the heavenly Daos. Anyone that can threaten the heavenly Daos will attract its punishment when advancing. Threaten the heavenly Daos? Could that be pointing to the 9-star hegemon body art? There are some things that I can't tell you too much about, or it wouldn't be beneficial to you. Rest a while and consolidate your cultivation base. I will be returning. Without waiting for Long Chen's response, her figure turned into a wisp of mist that slowly disappeared in front of Long Chen's eyes. Seeing her disappear, then looking at the flattened mountain peak, and then looking towards the completely cloudless sky, Long Chen felt as if he had been dreaming. Thinking back to that bolt of lightning, Long Chen shivered. That lightning bolt was something he had been completely unable to resist. Why hadn't it killed him? Then was it really as that woman had said, and the first heavenly punishment only tested his willpower? If his willpower had broke down, he would have been destroyed beneath that heavenly punishment. That heavenly punishment had revealed an unstoppable aura. He had been trying to flee, and it was only with the woman's warning that he had dared to face the heavenly punishment head-on. Without her warning, perhaps he would have already been exterminated in both body and soul. Lingering fear filled him. At the same time, he also understood just how important a powerful will was for martial cultivators. Cultivation was fundamentally a path of no retreat. He took a deep breath. With that woman's warning, it seemed as if he's seeing an even vaster world opening up before him. Space trembled as Long Chen returned his 13 cyclones into his body. He wanted to clearly test whether his cyclones had changed. Long Chen noticed that they hadn't grown any larger. But what amazed him was that after the heavenly punishment, there was now a link between all 13 cyclones. They were completely tied together. Now the 13 cyclones had a ring of light connecting them. They no longer were independent but had formed a single whole. Spiritual qi flowed throughout them. Under Long Chen's control, the 13 cyclones lightly trembled and began to quickly revolve. The ring of light also began to spin, forming a huge whirlpool that madly absorbed heaven and earth's spiritual qi. The absorption speed was at least 10 times greater than before. Even if Long Chen fought a powerful enemy again, he would not have to worry about running out of spiritual qi. Back when he had fought alongside Amon against Ding Ho, it was precisely because the consumption had been too great that they had run out of spiritual qi, making it so they were unable to continue fighting. Now that his 13 cyclones had linked together, he would basically never have to worry about that problem again. Furthermore, he also noticed that when the mysterious ring had connected his 13 cyclones, another thing had appeared in his body which was filling him with strength. Slowly closing his eyes and examining his body, Long Chen suddenly shook and went crazy with joy. Chapter 89 3-Style Parting Wind. When he slowly closed his eyes and examined his body, he realized that spiritual qi had appeared within his blood. Although it was very faint, he was sure that it was present. I've entered the blood condensation realm. So after reaching the 13th level of qi condensation by using the 9-star hegemon body art, you would enter blood condensation. The blood condensation realm was the point where the spiritual qi in the body had been condensed to the pinnacle. It would be scattered throughout the blood, purifying the blood of its impurities, returning it to its true essence. With such a pure blood nourishing the body, the physical body would become much stronger and one's strength would multiply. Having entered the blood condensation realm, Long Chen was so excited that he almost cried. Although, at this point, he still didn't feel his body immediately becoming stronger. But as long as the impurities in his blood were incessantly purified by his spiritual qi, his strength would quickly rise. And in any case, what the 9-star hegemon body art cultivated was the physical body. Now that he had entered the blood condensation realm, He would even be able to pose a threat to Ingho, who was at the muscle rebirth realm. Blood condensation was something that couldn't be rushed. Since Long Chen had 13 enormous cyclones, he didn't need to deliberately focus on it to purify his blood. That meant he would be a dozen times faster than ordinary people. What Long Chen wanted to do now wasn't to condense his blood, but to increase his actual strength. A battle skill appeared in his hand. Long Chen smiled. It was time to see just how powerful an Earth-class battle skill was. This was the first Earth-class battle skill Long Chen had ever obtained. Thinking back to the terrifying moves Ingho had displayed, he was filled with a burning passion. To Long Chen, who lacked battle skills, this particular battle skill came at an extremely opportune time. Speaking of which, he should really thank Xia Changfeng. He opened the battle skill and carefully read over it. His expression became a bit strange. He originally thought that the 3-style parting wind had 3 different moves. But as he read, he realized that it was just one move which had 3 variations. They were split into the parting wind slash, parting wind slice, and parting wind stab. The principles behind them were the exact same. It was just the final use of it that was different, making it 3 styles. It truly was deceptive. Thinking back to how Yao Niqian had sold it back then and how she had acted as if it was completely unique and amazing, he was completely speechless and felt cheated. According to that method, this 3-style parting wind could easily become 9 styles. Parting wind chop, parting wind thrust, parting wind swat. There could be as many styles as you wanted. Although he was a bit disappointed, Long Chen wasn't a person who didn't know to be content with what he had. After all, he had obtained it without spending a single cent. The person who should be depressed about it should be Xia Changfeng. Reading through the 3-style parting wind's usage of spiritual qi, Long Chen found that it only used 6 acupuncture points. That was much inferior to the 9 points required by Split the Heavens. Each time the spiritual qi passed through an acupuncture point, it would require an even greater control. It would be much more difficult with each point, but the power would also multiply. Originally, Long Chen had thought that Split the Heavens was a low-grade Earth-class battle skill, but now that he compared to the 3-style parting wind, the difficulty was clearly much greater. Wouldn't that mean that Split the Heavens was at least at the middle-grade Earth class, and perhaps even high-grade Earth class? No wonder Split the Heavens was so terrifying that he had been unable to control it. He had used Split the Heavens against Ingho before, but Long Chen knew that his usage was not the complete form. He did not dare use its full strength because his meridians weren't able to endure it. He also felt that even if he activated his Feng Fu star to its peak, he would still be unable to fulfill Split the Heavens' true requirements. Split the Heavens was just like a bottomless pit. He was still far from being able to use it truly. Perhaps he had truly accidentally picked up a true treasure. Long Chen's sword whistled through the air and a wave of qi shot out, slashing apart a shrub 10 meters away. It actually contains the wind's force. Is this sword qi? Long Chen finally understood why this Earth-class battle skill was called the 3-style parting wind. It actually was a wind attribute battle skill. Most battle skills used the superposition of multiple acupuncture points to increase the physical body's strength, similar to how Ingho had used his battle skill. Although that was powerful, it didn't have any attribute. The human body was just like a treasure trove of hidden treasures. Through continuous excavation, one could find endless hidden potential. For example, Meng Qi used her powerful spiritual strength to control magical beasts. She could use her spiritual strength to open up a space just like a spatial ring to store her house pets. For example, pill cultivators used the physical body's strength to condense a pill flame. Their flame's potential was endless, capable of destruction and also of merging heaven and earth's various treasures into medicinal pills. For example, martial artists condensed qi and blood, tempered their muscles and bones, forging their originally frail bodies into bodies that were even more powerful than magical beasts. All of these stemmed from the human body. The human body was filled with unknown mysteries. By following the methods that former generations left behind, people could strive to unlock their own hidden potential. As for the 3-style parting wind, by running spiritual qi through 6 specific acupuncture points, it could actually release spiritual qi outside the body to form an astral wind. The fact that Long Chen could summon an astral wind to blow apart a shrub 10 meters away with just his initial comprehension of the battle skill was definitely a pleasant surprise. Long Chen's pill god memories contain the exact routes of his meridians and locations of his acupuncture points, making it so that he was basically able to use a battle skill as soon as he learned it. However, this didn't mean he would be a master at it immediately. Using various battle skills required constant adaptation to find the best tempo and rhythm. Only then could he display its peak strength. That required constant testing and practice in order to do. But even so, Long Chen's cultivation speed was absolutely shocking. Even a muscle rebirth expert like Ying Ho would require several months just to be able to use an Earth-class battle skill, and if he wanted to have a complete mastery of it, that would require years. Although Long Chen couldn't master it immediately, he was still able to gain an initial skill in the 3-style parting wind due to his complete understanding of his meridians. With his experience in cultivating Split the Heavens, which required 9 acupuncture points, the 3-style parting wind was much easier. Furthermore, after obtaining the forest divinity's help, his meridians had doubled in width and were much tougher. He was absolutely able to control an Earth-class battle skill that normally only muscle rebirth experts were capable of using. The 3-style parting wind was actually just one move with 3 variations, split into a slash, slice, and stab. The method of circulating spiritual qi in the body was the same for all 3 variations. It was only when the spiritual qi left the body that the method from which it entered the weapon was different. That was why Long Chen left he would be able to change it into the 9-style parting wind and perhaps sell it for an even higher price. After testing it a couple times and becoming familiar with the meridians used, Long Chen paused his training of it and returned to the village. He had truly advanced a great deal this time. He had broken through to the blood condensation realm, and his 13 cyclones had joined together to form a divine ring. In the future, he would be able to summon it out and fight with his full strength. He had been unable to do that when he had 10 to 12 cyclones for fear of others being shocked by his anomaly. But the new divine ring was something that no one would guess was made of 13 cyclones. They would only be able to assume that it was some supplementary battle skill. The world of cultivation was boundless, and there were countless daos. Techniques and battle skills were as numerous as grains of sand. All kinds of rare and strange battle skills existed. As long as you didn't ostentatiously show it off, rare battle skills wouldn't cause too much of a ripple. With the assistance of that divine ring, not only would he able rise to another level when fighting, he would be able to fight for even longer. With it continuously absorbing spiritual qi and adding on how much spiritual qi could be stored in his Feng Fu star, he wouldn't have to worry about running out of spiritual qi again. Now Long Chen couldn't wait to fight against Ying Ho again. Back then he had been forced into despair by Ying Ho. If Xiaohua hadn't saved him, he would already be food for a magical beast. At the same time, Long Chen felt even more anxious. He didn't know just what was happening within the capital. He also didn't know whether his father had set any plans into motion after receiving his letter. Although he was extremely worried, Long Chen still had something he had to do first. That was to repay his debt to the forest divinity. After meeting the forest divinity who had come from the spirit world, Long Chen felt as if he had managed to peek into a whole new, vaster world. At the same time, that also lit up his passion. The world was so marvelous. The current him who was stuck in a small place like the Phoenix Cry Empire was nothing more than a frog at the bottom of a well. He was even more impatient to resolve the matters of the capital. He wanted to bring Chu Yao out to see the world. He wanted to see Bai Ling's Huayan sect, Meng Qi's Wind Spirit Pavilion, and Grandmaster Yun Qi's Pill Valley, which was a divine, holy land in the hearts of pill cultivators. The world was just too big. He had to go out to see it. But before that, he had to resolve his matters. The enmity of stealing his spirit blood, spirit bone, and spirit root still had to revenged. Otherwise, what was the point of cultivation? He had already mostly placed his suspicions on Ying Ho. However, he still wasn't completely sure if it was him, and he also didn't know why he would do such a thing. Was it because someone had told him to? And if so, who? The fourth prince was only in his 20s at this time, so he would still have been a child when he had been schemed against. So it probably wasn't the fourth prince who had ordered Ing-ho to do this. He shook his head and placed those thoughts aside. Wondering about such things was useless. The fact that Ing-ho had come to kill him this time meant that whatever plot they had been brewing for so long was finally ready and that they no longer had any misgivings. A huge event was about to explode, and the truth would immediately become evident. What Long Chen needed to do was to increase his strength as much as possible before that final critical moment. Only then could he protect his family. He had sent medicinal pills to help his father, but if the people beside him were only of ordinary talent, the chance of them breaking through was not great. The main target of the hidden scheme against the Long family was Long Tianxiao. Long Chen was just a minor character. Just to handle a minor character like him, they had sent a powerful figure like Ing-ho. Then in order to handle his father, they would definitely use an even more overbearing method. And so he didn't hope for any help from his father's side. All he hoped for was that those pills he had sent could help his father survive the approaching danger. As for the capital, he would have to rely on himself. So he was extremely pressed and couldn't waste even the slightest bit of time. He rushed back quickly towards the village. In order to not to alarm the villagers, he had run out quite far. He needed to talk to Xiao Hua about the village's surroundings. His speed only continued to increase, and he was like a wisp of smoke that shot to the village, leaving behind a long trail of dust and leaves. As the village approached, Long Chen gradually slowed down. As soon as he walked into the village, he suddenly heard an angry roar. Chapter 90 Little Snow's Return. All the villagers had gathered together, most of them carrying spears. They were all nervously on guard against a certain thing in front of them. That was a small wolf a meter long. It looked just like an ordinary ferocious dog, but its whole body was emitting a vicious aura that caused people to tremble in fear. Its eyes were especially filled a cold, bloodthirsty light that caused those hunters who even often killed magical beasts to feel extremely terrified. Originally, everyone had just been resting when all the babies suddenly began to let out terrified cries that drew everyone's attention. When they looked around and saw this small wolf, they were all given a fright. Their village walls were covered in poisonous thorns. Magical beasts had an innate fear of such things and they wouldn't force their way in. But this magical beast actually had charged through, causing everyone to be on guard. They were all ready to attack it. Stop! Long Chen was like a gale of wind as he suddenly burst on the scene and actually hugged that incomparably vicious magical beast. He couldn't believe his own eyes. It was Little Snow. Despite growing larger, Little Snow was covered in blood and mud. He was covered with dozens of wounds all over his body, and some of them were still bleeding while some areas had even been cut all the way down to the bone. Woo-woo! When Little Snow saw Long Chen, the vicious aura around him immediately disappeared without a trace, becoming tender and warm. He rubbed his head over Long Chen's face over and over. But as for the villagers, when they saw him suddenly hug a dangerous magical beast, they all turned pale with fright. That was a magical beast. To be wild and vicious was in their nature. Even a young magical beast was many times more powerful than an ordinary wild beast. Now they were all dumbstruck as they watched this. How was that a magical beast? It seemed more like a puppy. Little Snow, you've suffered. Long Chen couldn't help feeling emotional when he saw all the wounds on Little Snow. Perhaps Amun had forgotten Little Snow, or perhaps Little Snow had secretly run out on his own. In any case, he had relied on his wolf nose to find his trail. But his trail was 1,000 miles away in a remote area with countless wild beasts roving around. Little Snow had clearly run into dangerous situations many times. Little Snow was now 3 times larger than he was before. By relying on himself to hunt wild beasts, he had managed to grow stronger. Woo-woo! Little Snow continuously rubbed against Long Chen, actually trying to comfort him. Long Chen knew this because of the slight connection between their souls. That made him feel even more ashamed, and he picked up Little Snow and introduced him to everyone as his house pet, and only then did everyone calm down. Long Chen carried Little Snow into his room and carefully examined Little Snow's wounds. Some were teeth injuries from where he had been bitten by wild beasts. One of his feet was swollen greatly, and there was a scent of rot coming from it. Long Chen looked at it and saw there were 2 small pricks. He suspected it was from some sort of poisonous bite. Luckily, Little Snow's physique was strong and was able to block that poison. A different wild beast would probably have long since let out its final death cry. Long Chen brought Little Snow over to a basin of clean drinking water. He dissolved a medicinal pill within the water first before washing Little Snow's wounds. There were simply too many open wounds, and some places had become inflamed. Even more importantly, there was a part of his flesh at the bottom of his foot that had rotted and needed to be cut off. Xiaohua couldn't help feeling her skin crawl when she saw Long Chen cleaning Little Snow's wounds. That was especially the case when she saw him actually bring a knife to cut off some of his foot. Little Snow's head was perfectly placed right against Long Chen's neck. As long as he opened his mouth, Long Chen's neck would immediately be cut open. But whether it was while his wounds were being cleaned or when his rotten flesh was cut off, Little Snow merely trembled without making a single noise. An hour later, Long Chen had placed medicinal ointments all over Little Snow's body and wrapped up his wounds. Looking at Xiaohua, who seemed as if she had finally been relieved of a heavy burden, Long Chen smiled and placed Little Snow on his bed. Gently rubbing Little Snow's head, he explained, "He's my companion. You don't need to be worried." Looking at the peacefully sleeping Little Snow, Xiaohua shook her head. "That really almost frightened me to death. So humans can actually become companions with magical beasts?" Long Chen smiled. "Sometimes people are even more terrifying than magical beasts. Otherwise your ancestors also wouldn't have brought you guys to such a place. At least there are warning signs when magical beasts are about to attack you. But when humans are planning on attacking you, there aren't any signs, and you won't be on guard. By the time you sense the danger, you'll already be dead. So your ancestors were actually very intelligent people. They understood that the danger you can see isn't the true danger. The truly dangerous things are those that you cannot see." Xiaohua was bewildered by what Long Chen was saying. She clearly didn't really comprehend what he was saying, but hearing him praise her ancestors still made her happy. "Hopefully our kids will also be as smart and brave as you. Then I'll become the person who has contributed the most to the village." Xiaohua excitedly laughed. Long Chen's expression stiffened. Looking at her open and innocent expression, he bitterly smiled. He supposed this girl didn't know just how complicated having children was. Xiaohua was a naive child. Although Long Chen was fond of her, he had no romantic feelings for her. He thought this matter over. In the end, he came up with a plan to leave the village in secret. Although that would be very hurtful to Xiaohua, that was something that could not be avoided. But before he left, Long Chen still had to complete a couple matters. First, he had to repay his hunting debt to the forest divinity, and then he had to tell Xiaohua what those gold coins were used for. There were at least several millions of gold coins. He had to warn her to be careful with their usage and not to let any greedy eyes fall on her. As long as she learned how to use those gold coins, then with the spatial ring, the amount they could procure from each trip would be enough to last the village for a whole year. Little Snow's arrival caused all the villagers to become nervous. After all, in the past hundreds of years, that was the first time a magical beast had intruded on their village. The next day, when Little Snow once more awoke and became active, all the villagers once more became anxious. But Little Snow only obediently followed alongside Long Chen, not even looking at the others, appearing very cute. Only then did the villagers let their guards down slightly. There were even some curious children that stealthily approached Little Snow despite others berating them. At the beginning, Little Snow just ignored them. When that group of small children were around 3 meters away from him, he suddenly glanced at them. Just that one glance terrified all those children. They all thought Little Snow was about to attack and fled for their lives, crying for someone to save their lives. One of those kids even tripped and fell to the ground. He just lay there crying, even wetting his pants. The adults watched as this happened. They saw that Long Chen merely smiled the whole time without doing anything. Due to their trust in Long Chen, they hadn't said anything up till this point. Seeing little Snow actually send the group of children fleeing away with just a glance, they actually ended up laughing. This was the first time a magical beast had entered their village, so even the adults were extremely curious. Long Chen, what magical beast is this? None of the villagers were able to recognize little Snow. A scarlet flame snow wolf. When matured, it is a third-rank magical beast, replied Long Chen. Third rank? They had only ever heard of second-rank magical beasts. And that was only from listening to their elders who told a story from over 100 years ago. One of their ancestors had once ended up at a mountain stream while hunting and ended up running into a second-rank magical beast. That would end up becoming a disaster for the village. At that time, over 30 hunters had worked together, the result of which was that only a dozen of them had returned alive. From that point onwards, they no longer dared crossing that mountain stream. Moreover, the villagers who ended up committing grave crimes were forever forced over that mountain stream. In reality, the first thing that had popped into the villagers' minds when the forest divinity had requested a second-rank magical beast was that disaster. At that time, everyone's expressions had been extremely ugly. But Xiaohua had been determined to save Long Chen. She said that after Long Chen was healed, they would definitely be able to work together and kill a second-rank magical beast. And so just second-rank magical beast was already a nightmare in their eyes. But as for this little wolf in front of them, it was an even more frightening third-rank magical beast, so how could they not be astonished? Everyone assembled for lunch, and afterwards, Long Chen spoke to the elder. "Chief, are there any second-rank magical beasts around?" His expression changed slightly. "You're thinking of?" "Yes, I'm thinking of going to hunt second-rank magical beasts to return the forest divinity's favor as early as possible. The feeling of owing a debt is truly uncomfortable." Everyone in the village shivered in trepidation, but Long Chen noticed that some of them were actually eager to give it a try. "Child, I do know of the location of a second-rank magical beast. However, it is extremely hard to handle." The elder was hesitant. "Don't worry, village chief. I'm already fully recovered, and an ordinary second-rank magical beast is no problem," laughed Long Chen. Long Chen was actually being modest. Even before he had broken through to blood condensation, ordinary second-rank magical beasts had still not been his match. And now that he had advanced, even though he was still only at that initial advance and had yet to even reach the first heaven stage, his blood had already begun to be purified, and with each breath, his blood and strength continued to grow stronger. Long Chen wanted to find a second-rank magical beast and test his strength. He also wanted to see just how many styles of parting wind he could use. Since Long Chen was so determined, the elder sighed. "Fine. All our village's fighters will bring the best equipment to help you slaughter that brute." All the hunters let out a cheer of agreement, and they returned to their houses to get their weapons and everything else they needed. Long Chen looked at those fervent people and immediately understood something. "Senior village chief, you don't need to rouse everyone for this matter. Just tell me where it is. I alone am enough," lightly said Long Chen. "What?" Chapter 91 King Kong Fury Ape. Within the undulating mountain range, huge trees with thick vines covering them reached for the sky, and the occasional roar of wild beasts would shake the land. A 10-meter-tall King Kong Fury Ape emitted an angry roar that shook the forest, causing streams of leaves to tumble to the ground. Facing the King Kong Fury Ape was a human who wasn't even comparable to it in size. That person was Long Chen, who was currently emitting intense fluctuations that made him seem like a celestial emperor. This location was originally a forest, however now all the huge trees within hundreds of meters had collapsed. The vegetation and rocks had been sent tumbling away, forming an empty land. Long Chen had received a map from the village chief which marked the dangerous areas. In a particular spot was the location of a second-rank magical beast. That would be King Kong Fury Ape in front of him. Back then, the ancestors of the villagers had accidentally charged into its territory, resulting in disastrous casualties. The villagers both hated and feared this King Kong Fury Ape. When they heard Long Chen was planning on hunting a second-rank magical beast, it was the first thing they thought of. However, Long Chen had refused to have any others come with him. Even Xiao Hua wasn't an exception. He had followed the map by himself, easily finding this place. As expected, the King Kong Fury Ape's awareness of its territory was extremely great. As soon as Long Chen had stepped into this region of the forest, he was found and attacked. Roar! The King Kong Fury Ape heavily beat its own chest with its huge fists. The next instant, it charged at Long Chen. The King Kong Fury Ape was a magical beast that specialized in power. But compared to the burst bear, it was much more terrifying as it had reached the second rank. Its enormous body was practically a small mountain. Its speed was also shocking, and it arrived in front of Long Chen in the blink of an eye. Long Chen formed a fist, and the instant he did, he actually disappeared, leaving behind a wild gale. He had already been fighting with the King Kong Fury Ape for a full hour. It truly was worthy of being a second-rank magical beast. Its power was extremely great. According to Long Chen's estimates, the burst bear he had killed before would probably not even be able to take a single blow from this King Kong Fury Ape. Just a random blow from it had tens of tons of force behind it. If Long Chen hadn't advanced to blood condensation, then just relying on his physical body, he also wouldn't have been able to beat it. Having fought for so long on equal grounds for so long, now Long Chen was planning on not wasting any more time. Breaking Wind Fist. Wild gales unfurled and a faint layer of light appeared on Long Chen's fist. His fist heavily smashed onto the King Kong Fury Ape's arm. With a muffled bang, the mountain-like King Kong Fury Ape was actually sent flying dozens of meters away, slamming and breaking over 10 huge trees behind it. As expected, his physical body had greatly improved after advancing to blood condensation. Even his control of battle skills had improved. The power of the Breaking Wind Fist was much greater than when he had been in the Qi condensation realm. Adding on to his physical strength, it was able to force back a second-rank magical beast. Long Chen himself hadn't expected himself to grow so much stronger after entering the blood condensation realm. Even his usage of battle skills became more skilled. The King Kong Fury Ape was on its last legs. It emitted a loud roar and angrily glared at him. It had been the overlord of this region for hundreds of years. This was the first time it had been provoked by a small human, and it was completely unable to accept this. Boom! It smashed the land, and suddenly its black fur stood completely on end. A frightening aura came from it. Long Chen was startled. He immediately sensed the change and hadn't expected that this magical beast actually had power hidden in reserve. It raised its fangs at Long Chen and stamped on the ground, immediately charging over like meteor. Long Chen suddenly felt an intense pressure. He didn't dare be careless. His power exploded out and he once more used the Breaking Wind Fist. But this time Long Chen felt his body shake and he was sent flying when his fist smashed into the King Kong Fury Ape. He only managed to stabilize 60 meters away. It was actually able to attack on the same level as a muscle rebirth expert. As expected, the body of a magical beast truly is frightening. Long Chen shook his slightly numb arm. That attack had been extraordinary just now. If he hadn't advanced to blood condensation, there would have even been a chance his arm would have broken. Although that attack hadn't been on the same level as Ing Ho's attacks, it was only one level weaker. It really was true that humans on the same level as magical beasts were not able to fight against them. Obviously, this King Kong Fury Ape had its own hidden trump cards. Only this was its strongest state. It once more angrily roared and charged at Long Chen. But before Long Chen even made a move, a ray of light suddenly shot past and struck it head-on. That ray of light had been extremely fast, and it had struck the King Kong Fury Ape before it could even react. But that light ray hadn't even managed to cut through its skin before being broken. Long Chen was slightly surprised. At some unknown time, Little Snow, who had been hiding in the distance, had run up and his mouth was currently open. A wind blade? Long Chen had heard before that third rank and higher magical beasts had their own inherited battle skills. So it was actually true. But the wind blade Little Snow had spat out had been pitifully weak. Of course, just how old was Little Snow? Little Snow hadn't even reached the first rank yet, but was still able to launch long-distance attacks. It truly was shocking. Seeing that his attack hadn't had any effect, Little Snow prepared to attack again. But suddenly he felt himself be sent flying. Don't make trouble. Long Chen had thrown Little Snow further away. That little fellow must have thought he had been in danger and wanted to help. But his little bit of attack power couldn't even tickle the King Kong Fury Ape. He was afraid Little Snow would be hurt, so he directly threw him somewhere safer. Looking at the King Kong Fury Ape charging at him, Long Chen coldly shouted, "Come out, divine ring." Suddenly a ring of light appeared behind Long Chen. It grew to a diameter of 3,000 meters. The original cyclones could no longer be seen as part of it. The 13 cyclones had merged into one, and looking from a distance, it appeared to be a rainbow. But after the divine ring appeared, heaven and earth trembled slightly. The spiritual chi within an area of hundreds of miles flowed towards Long Chen, causing him to immediately reel invigorated, his whole body full of strength. Long Chen had realized that after his 13 cyclones had merged together, the effect was just like when he used to inject some of his Feng Fu Star's spiritual chi into his cyclones. However, now it was constant. Their efficiency had reached a terrifying level. At this point, the King Kong Fury Ape had already arrived in front of Long Chen. Without even thinking about, Long Chen punched out. Bang! An explosion shook the sky as terrifying waves of chi radiated out. Long Chen's long hair danced and his clothes fluttered. The divine ring behind him contrasted and complemented him, making him appear like a celestial emperor disdainfully looking down on the 9 firmaments. The King Kong Fury Ape's terrifying attack was actually completely blocked by Long Chen. At this time, Long Chen felt an unprecedented strength within him. It appeared he had still underestimated this divine ring. The divine ring formed from the superimposition of 13 cyclones caused his strength to explode by an enormous amount. It was so great that even he felt some disbelief. He didn't have much understanding of the 9-star Hegemon body art. The combination of the 13 cyclones was even more effective than when he used his Feng Fu Star's spiritual chi to empower his cyclones. It truly was a technique that was endlessly profound and would require continuous exploration. Long Chen let out an earth-shaking roar. That enormous King Kong Fury Ape was shockingly directly thrown into the air by him. His broadsword then arced through the air, releasing a sword light that cut straight through its body, causing blood to fill the air. The 2 pieces of its corpse fell to the ground. It really is worthy of being an Earth-class battle skill. What a terrifying killing strength. Even such a powerful being like the King Kong Fury Ape was cleanly cut in 2 by the parting wind slash. It seemed he had been looking down on the technique. In reality, Long Chen was still unaware that it wasn't all Earth-class battle skills that could launch ranged attack. On the contrary, most battle skills worked by being applied on top of weapons. It was only by chance that the 3-style parting wind was a battle skill that used the body's wind attribute to release sword chi that could be used for ranged attacks. Such battle skills were actually quite rare. It also required that the martial artist have wind attribute spiritual chi in order to train in it. It wasn't like ordinary Earth-class battle skills that were attributeless that only required spiritual chi to be injected into the weapon. Although such techniques were rare, it also had its own flaws. The main one was that those without the wind attribute spiritual chi in their body were unable to use it. As for Long Chen, he was just a beginner to the cultivation world and didn't know what this attributes meant. Just a careless test had allowed him to successfully train in it. If such a situation was known by Xia Changfeng, wouldn't he be angered enough to die a second time? Awu! Long Chen was interrupted from his thoughts by Little Snow running up to the King Kong Fury Ape's corpse. It actually started to wildly tear at its flesh. The King Kong Fury ape's physical body was extremely powerful and tough. Yet Little Snow was still able to tear off a piece of its flesh for himself. But chewing it was extremely strenuous. Little Snow seemed to be similar to Amon in that meat was the source of their strength and could allow them to get stronger. As soon as either of them saw meat, they had to eat it. Long Chen took out a knife and cut off a few pieces of Little Snow. But Little Snow ignored that, focusing completely on tearing the King Kong Fury ape's thigh muscles. Long Chen helplessly cut a few strips of that part of. This corpse was to be offered to the forest divinity, but Long Chen presumed that a gentle woman like her wouldn't be so stingy as to bicker about a bit of flesh. Little Snow had traveled hundreds of miles for him. Who knew just how much he had suffered? If he didn't let that little fellow eat his full, Long Chen would feel even more ashamed of himself. Once the little fellow had eaten his full and his stomach was bulging out, he finally stopped and Long Chen tidied up the corpse, preparing to drag it along. That was because its corpse was too big and was unable to fit in the spatial ring. The other reason was that Long Chen wanted to keep the scent of its blood outside. He continued deeper into the depths of the forest. Chapter 92 World-Binding Blood Sacrifice. A 6-meter-long bright-colored tiger fell to the ground with a 7-foot-long broadsword stabbed into its head. The broadsword was yanked out of its head, bringing with it a spray of blood. Long Chen wiped off some sweat. Looking at the several magical beast corpses behind him, he relaxed a great deal. Over the past 2 days, Long Chen had dragged along magical beast corpses behind him, and as he had expected, the scent of their blood had drawn over other beasts. Those beasts had exceptionally keen senses when it came to that blood scent. That scent meant a magical beast was injured. Magical beasts were extremely ferocious, and oftentimes there would be intense battles over territory. Deep within this thick forest, being injured signified that death was near. Those beasts that wouldn't dare provoke magical beasts in normal times would all leap at this chance. This tiger was already his 8th magical beast. Now there was a long string of magical beast corpses behind him. There were tigers, leopards, and even huge lizards. They were all neatly strung together firmly by beast tendons. Little Snow leisurely padded along those corpses and would take frantic bites until he was completely full, then fall asleep. After that nap, he would immediately start eating again. This long train of magical beasts had become a luxurious carriage with a free buffet for him. Long Chen checked over his spoils. He currently had 3 second-rank magical beasts and 6 peak first-rank magical beasts. That should be enough to repay the forest divinity of her favor. A single second-rank magical beast's flesh definitely contained more energy than even 10 first-rank magical beasts. Long Chen's spoils had long since exceeded the forest divinity's demands. Long Chen remembered her benevolence and didn't want to owe too much of a debt. Furthermore, when he had been resisting the heavenly punishment, it was the forest divinity who had helped him. He had actually been hoping to get a bit more, but even after walking for a whole extra day, there were no more magical beasts that came. There didn't seem to be any more second-rank magical beasts. As for weaker first-rank magical beasts, they were attracted by the blood, but they didn't approach. Even a wounded second-rank magical beast could easily kill them. So despite roaming around for a whole day, he no longer made any more harvests. He switched directions to go directly the mountain peak of the forest divinity. When Long Chen arrived at that huge tree, the white-robed woman slowly reappeared. But when she saw the long train of huge magical beast corpses behind him, she didn't have too great of a reaction. "You've come." "Yes, I've come to settle our debt," smiled Long Chen. "The remuneration you brought has exceeded our initial pledge. That's not exactly fair to you." "In this world, there was never any real fairness. I'm just doing this to make myself feel better. I don't like owing people favors," said Long Chen. She nodded. "Then I'll thank you. The flesh you've brought should be enough for me fully activate the blood sacrifice to bind our worlds and break out of this space back to the spirit world." That huge tree trembled slightly, and those huge corpses all disappeared in just a moment. "Ayo." Little Snow, who was originally sleeping on those corpses, was suddenly awoken. He couldn't help going into a wild panic when he saw all those corpses had disappeared. He wanted to get one last bite in, but he only bit down on empty air. He actually angrily started roaring at the woman. "Don't make a fuss, Little Snow." Long Chen laughingly shouted at that little fellow to calm down. "Haha, you think I stole your meat?" She laughed. "It's true you need meat to grow stronger. But I can give you something much better than meat." She waved her hand and a bright ray of light poured into Little Snow's forehead. Little Snow shockingly began to slowly grow larger after being enveloped by that light. He actually grew from being just 1 meter long to being close to 3 meters long. Little Snow now almost reached Long Chen's shoulders. Furthermore, Long Chen could sense a powerful aura that was only becoming stronger coming from Little Snow. Second rank. The current aura coming from Little Snow was the aura of a second-rank magical beast. "I took your meat, so I'll give you the energy to mature so that we're even." The woman laughed and rubbed Little Snow's head. That really startled Long Chen. Other than himself, Little Snow had never allowed anyone else to touch him. If Little Snow were to attack, that would definitely sour the situation. But Little Snow was unusually calm. He seemed to actually greatly enjoy her rubbing. Afterwards he lay on the ground and took a nap. "I've completely awakened its spirit. It can count as me compensating it," she said to Long Chen. "Doesn't it seem like I now owe another favor?" Long Chen couldn't help shaking his head and bitterly smiling. He had thought he could completely repay his favors this time. But in the end, now he owed another favor. But that favor was definitely worth it. Little Snow was a third-rank magical beast, a scarlet flame snow wolf. His battle strength was extremely great. Now that he had already advanced to the second rank, even if he couldn't defeat a muscle rebirth expert, he would still be able to fight against them for a while. Such a powerful companion could definitely provide a measure of safety for someone like him who was surrounded by danger. "You're too gracious. My spirit clan also doesn't like owing favors. Originally, it probably would have taken me at least a couple hundred years before being able to return to the spirit world. But you've allowed me to return home much earlier. The one who should be saying thanks is me," she politely said. "Now I'll be beginning the world-binding blood sacrifice. You should back up a bit." Hearing that, Long Chen hastily woke up Little Snow and rushed further away. With how solemn she was, he didn't dare be careless. At the same time, he was also extremely curious as to what that so-called world-binding blood sacrifice was. Rumble. Long Chen was several miles away when rumbling began. He hastily turned to look back and jumped in shock. The huge tree which stretched several miles into the sky suddenly began to explosively grow. Its enormous treetop spread, piercing through the clouds and covering half the sky. The many leaves completely hid the mountain peak. The leaves had countless symbols shining on top of them. Divine light overflowed from them and covered the sky. Long Chen watched with his mouth wide open. What kind of existence was this? Was it really a divinity? Did this world really have divinities? If it wasn't a divinity, what else could cover up the entire sky? What else had an aura that was so ancient? In front of that intimidating aura, Long Chen felt as if he wasn't even an ant, as if he was just a speck of dust. "It's the forest divinity." The village chief was also shocked, but the villagers recognized it to be the forest divinity. Looking at the scene, all those villagers knelt on the ground and prostrated themselves towards that direction. The forest divinity appeared in the sky above. She formed a strange hand seal. "Respected ancestors, please hear your people's call. With blood as the guide, open a path home for your people, world-binding blood sacrifice." Following her devout shout, an image made of blood appeared in the sky. By carefully looking at it, you could tell that that was the image of a leaf. Long Chen guessed that that blood was the essence blood of the magical beasts she had collected over the years. But he still didn't truly comprehend why someone as amazingly powerful as her would use human hunters to collect that bloods. With her terrifying cultivation, no matter how strong the magical beast was, they would all be blown to bits just by a single breath. Was that resentful while she had mentioned actually so terrifying? Boom. Heaven and earth trembled, causing Long Chen to almost fall to the ground. Raising his head, he saw that the blood image in the sky had begun to twist. Following space's slow warping, a huge gate 50 kilometers high formed. As soon as it fully formed, it began to slowly open. The instant that door opened, Long Chen saw the world within it. That was also a world of endless trees. But each huge tree was so tall as to prop up the heavens. There were also countless spirit beasts roaming within, each of them so large that they were comparable to mountains. A spiritual chi that was so dense it had almost turned solid also came out of it, that huge door. Just taking a slight breath, Long Chen felt his cultivation base quickly rising. It truly was too shocking. I'm about to leave, so thank you for your help. Expert, my spirit clan looks forward to your arrival. I know that day will not be too far off. The woman waved her hand to Long Chen, and the huge heaven-reaching tree slowly shrunk and entered the gate. This is my gift to you. The previous agreement is over, so treat it as a new promise. She extended a hand and a small drop of dark green blood fell towards Long Chen. Long Chen hastily reached out to receive it. That droplet emitted an extremely dense vitality. Long Chen could sense the terrifying life energy within it. That woman's entire figure dimmed greatly after sending that drop out. Obviously, that drop was an extremely important thing to her. I can sense that you will become a peak expert in the future. My spirit clan needs your help. Your body actually has a... Before she got halfway, she suddenly let out a terrified scream, and without even the time to say goodbye to Long Chen, she disappeared behind the huge door. Boom! 7 colored lightnings suddenly appeared in the sky and smashed that huge door to pieces. That had happened too fast, and before Long Chen could even react, the huge door had already faded away. The world on the opposite side could no longer be seen. It was as if everything had been a dream. But that mountain the forest divinity had been on was now a crater. Now the forest divinity had left, but this place still had some remnant dense spiritual chi in the air. Long Chen quickly sat down and began to cultivate with Little Snow standing guard. It went without saying that Long Chen's decision was extremely smart. In just a short 6 hours, an explosive sound came from his body. That explosive sound came from Long Chen's blood. He had finally entered the first heaven stage of blood condensation, becoming a true blood condensation expert. Since the leftover spiritual chi from that huge door had already dissipated at this point, Long Chen no longer wasted any more time. He directly returned to the village. It was time to say farewell. But there was still one big question that kept repeating in his mind at this time. What had the forest divinity meant at that last point? What had she been meaning to say before leaving in a panic? She said his body had something on it? What could possibly cause someone as strong as her to feel so afraid? As those questions churned in his head, he ended up getting quite close to the village, when suddenly a faint scent of blood floated past his nose. Long Chen's expression changed and he pressed down on the ground, shooting forward like an arrow towards the village. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.